Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Community Environment and Partnerships Committee and the normal starting announcements. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the ends of the room and at the sides. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. The meeting is being webcast live on the internet. Mobile phones, please make sure yours is off or on silent. And I think I did that with mine, but I will double check seeing as I've done the announcement. Yes, good. Right. Apologies for absence and substitution. I'm aware of two. We have apology from Councillor Stephen Marks, who's been replaced by Councillor Donald Sherlock, and from Councillor Mrs. Court, who's been replaced by Councillor Robert Tate. So welcome to you two. I think it's the normal team on the rest of the thing. Very good. Right. Or did we also have an apology from Councillor Stephen Day, I think, who's not been substituted as far as I know, but he has sent his apology. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? For the avoidance of doubt, I will point out that I have an interest in the first item on debt and the high cost of credit, because when I'm not here as a councillor, I act as a debt advisor, but I do that as a volunteer and with an organisation that's not funded by the council, so I don't have a pecuniary interest. I'm just very interested in that particular subject. Any urgent matters? I don't think there are any. Minutes of the committee meeting held on the 17th of September. We happy with that committee? Because if so, I shall sign them at the end of the meeting as a correct record. Thank you. We have 4 substantial items on the agenda. I'm planning to take them in basically the order they come. We've invited Graham Hatcher, the Chief Executive Officer of Citizens Advice, to come and talk to us in connection with debt and the high cost of credit. And as the other 3 subjects go together, if I kept him to the end, he'd be at the very end. So I think out of fairness, we should let him have his proper place on the agenda and go first. And then we really need to have the update on Basingstoke Live and Basingstoke Festival, what happened this year, before we get into discussing the future. So we will keep pretty much to the order, but I will try and get members of the public who want to speak on at a very reasonable hour. So that will depend on cooperation from the committee and not talking too long on the earlier items. So tonight we also, I think, have Chief Executive of another of our voluntary organisations, Basingstoke Voluntary Action. Rebecca Kenley's in there, who may speak later. And I think we have no fewer than 3 cabinet members who all get introduced at their relevant point in the proceedings. So it's a popular and meeting should be an interesting evening. Okay, so without further ado, we'll get on to debt and the high cost of credit. And Councillor Eachus, the cabinet member, will introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. Just this paper is an update on the debt and the high cost of credit. It follows on from a council motion on the 10th of October 2013, which highlighted the number of residents experiencing severe debt and the high cost of credit that goes with that. In February 2014, the Community Wellbeing Overview and Scrutiny Committee invited a number of stakeholders to come to the committee, which they did, and they gave some very good presentations to councillors. This then resulted in a number of main issues being set out that their clients were facing. The minutes of that OSCOM then highlighted several key areas that presented challenges for this borough, which in turn over this year have all been examined by officers. These issues, the issues that were explored are all set out in the report, and I hope that you can all support the proposed action points that are set out in the report in detail in relation to each issue. They're set out on pages 4 to 14. I would say that officers have worked quite hard, and in my view they are all very sensible ways forward. Apologies, I think I'm now passing over to Graham to do a presentation.
Right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me back. What I've done is I've produced a very short paper, I hope, with lots of information, and I'm just going to go through and highlight some of the points on there. Really starting off with the actual profile of the clients that's on the inside page, because one of the questions that was asked about debt and generally the clients was, is there a typical client? And the answer is that there's not. As you can see, there's a wide range of household types and range of different ages and abilities. that come to the CAB. One noticeable change this year compared to others is the number of people who've got a disability or long-term health problem. That's increased by about 5%, number of people coming to us year on year. The next slide is just showing the top issues and in a breakdown of the issues, and you'll notice now that benefit and tax credits have actually taken over from debt, and there's a breakdown there of the different issues as well, including employment support allowance being the top benefit tax credits, job housing benefit, job seekers allowance. So I think you can see that again there's a wide range of people being helped, and that credit cards and store cards are now, used to be a highest one, but now rent arrears and with housing associations is fairly high, and payday loans are included in unsecured personal loan debts. The next slide with the pie chart just gives you an idea of the sort of the percentages of all the issues that we're faced with. The top ones, as I've said, are benefits, debt, then employment and housing. And again, we've got a bit of a breakdown on there. You can see last year we dealt with 209 people threatened with homelessness. But there are other issues like environmental and neighbour issues as well, so it's not all about that. The quarters, this year, the figures really have followed a similar pattern, which is no surprise really, because there's been a tightening up of sort of assessments for people being fit for work, and that's something that I'll talk about a little bit later on when I talk about our social policy. So we've also, so you've got a comparison, we've got national trends, because obviously the welfare reform is coming in next year for new applicants, and we know that that's had an impact nationally. So what we've done is given you an idea there, and employment support allowance nationally remains the largest category of all benefit issues, and actually nationally are up by 15%. And a slide later on will also say that, show that with the sanctions and things like that, that's led to a bigger increase or demand for food parcels. Council tax arrears nationally are up, as you can see as well, and rent arrears, and of course that's a fear going forward when there's going to be a total cap on the benefits that people can have under welfare reform. So we think that that work will increase for us. And there's a breakdown then again of the quarter one debt issues, and it's rent arrears, credit card, fuel, water supply debt, and we do quite a lot of work with actual financial capability and fuel debt, including sort of energy best deal. We've got an energy best deal extra project that we do, all sponsored through Ofgem, where actually if people come in and we see that they've got fuel debt, we can actually do more work with them to check their benefits. And there's sometimes we have winter fuel payment grants made for individuals as well. I mentioned food vouchers, and as you can see, last year we gave over 570 food vouchers, and you can see we've sort of highlighted there that there's benefit delays, benefit sanctions, actually a significant factor in the number of food parcels being given out. And as a result of that, with our work with the welfare steering group, we've started a questionnaire trying to find out what the process of sanctions, where it's going wrong, and how we could sort of feed that back to DWP. So there's a very brief summary of what we're doing there. I know that Camrose have taken the questionnaire on, and we're hoping that other organisations would take the questionnaire on, where we can find out more information and collect more information about job sanctions. At the last presentation, I talked about our social policy and the work that Citizens Advice are doing on payday loans. And I'm very pleased to say that there's been some major changes since then. about payday loan lenders having now to carry out proper affordability checks. They can only roll over a loan a maximum of 2 times, and the continuous priority payment authority, which always really ranked up the cost of credit, has been reduced and limited to 2 times. And of course, just recently we've heard all about Wonga and what's happened with Wonga. So we're very pleased with the progress that's been made with payday loans. And on the other side of this, there are some case studies, just giving a reminder of some of the issues that we talked about. There's one example of a lady who took out a payday loan to be repaid over 1 month. But actually, because of continuous payment authority, after 42 days, that increased to £1,200, so it doubled within a very short time. Hopefully that won't happen so much now. There's been tighter rules, but even so, there's still inappropriate lending being seen when it comes to payday loans. Lost my place now. We are looking at other campaigns. I talked about the assessment for Fit for Work, and if you have a look, we've got some on this page here which says our campaigns need you, and on the back of that there's a summary of some of the social policy campaigns that we're doing nationally. So that's social policies where we collect evidence and actually locally and nationally, and then feed that back to central government to say we think these things are wrong. So that's a very brief update of where we are at Citizens Advice.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful. We have one notified speaker for this subject, which is Councillor Harvey. So I think we'll let Councillor Harvey speak now, and then we'll do questions for either the portfolio holder or the officers or Graham, and any debate we need to have. But Paul, if you'd like to come forward. And under the new rules, you get 4 minutes.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for letting me address the committee on this issue. I was on the committee when the debate took place in the previous format of the committee, and I was part of the motion coming forward to full council originally. And this issue is important to us. It's important to a lot of people. And that debate round the table at the last committee was very healthy. It was cross-party, and there were a significant number of issues that were raised that we really felt we wanted to see some action on. Now, I do respect what the cabinet member says in terms of let's have a look at the recommendations one by one, and let's look at the various bits that are put out as action. But what I don't see is urgency. What I don't see, and this is why I think it's a little disappointing, is a sense that since we put the motion over a year ago, we're still talking about discussing things, and we're still talking about things. But what we're not seeing is some pretty affirmative action. And I'm speaking to the paper rather than to the presentation from the CAB, because I recognise what you said about the food banks in relation to myself when I went to see the food bank, and in relation to the benefit sanctions and the issues they're facing with the massive increasing workload associated with referral due to benefit sanction. But what we're talking about specifically here are the issues of debt and the issues that residents are facing in relation to payday lenders and the operation of those others, groups and organisations who they would get support from. Now, on that basis, I'm really disappointed that the credit union is no longer in Basingstoke. We have missed an opportunity there. We really did. We were bent up trying to talk to them about whether they could have a place in the town centre and how much it would cost and what the lease arrangements might be and could they do it. We heard what the colleagues said at the last meeting of the difficulties they faced as an organisation. We didn't help them. And that is a real regret, and we should be ashamed of that for all of the reasons. And we can find excuses, but that's not good enough. So the nearest credit union facility directly is Fratton Park, down in Portsmouth, unless you go online, unless you pick up the phone. That's useless. Not everybody can use the phone in that respect to do their banking, and not everybody can go online. Having a facility here in Basingstoke, such as the credit union, is incredibly important, and I would like to see us address that and see if we can work with them and their business plan to bring them back to our town to offer that facility to our residents. In relation to the gambling issues associated in the report, again, I'd like to see the licensing committee have a really good look at that. The licensing committee has the powers to look at it, they have the ability to look at it, and they should examine it in the context of renewing our gambling policies as an authority. So rather than talk about it in a generic way, let's refer it somewhere trying to get some action with it. Talking about the Smarter Buy scheme, again, it's really good what Sovereign are doing in regard to the Smarter Buy scheme. That was a really good part of the presentation last time round. But again, where is the development of that? Where is us supporting Sovereign in taking that forward in a way that offers it to far more residents in our borough than just Sovereign housing association tenants? They aren't the only housing association in town. So we need to work on that, I think, as a really important piece of action to Sovereign, to Guinness, to so on, that those other residents in those other tenancies, in those other housing associations could benefit from that. I think that's important. Yes, the cross-party support led by Stella Creasy as the Labour MP who's championing the issues of payday lenders in Parliament has led to a change in legislation. What that has not changed are the significant number of residents that we have in our borough who continue to have debt issues and continue to have problems with payday lenders. It's not as if that piece of legislation has overnight solved the problem.
Half a minute.
So what I'd like to ask really is, if this is going to go forward, can we just have some serious concentration on actions rather than talking it through? And just as the final example, Chair, the idea of referring the matter of what we do with our buildings to the ethical panel is interesting, because they're talking about our investments. They're not talking about how they deal with property at the moment. That was actually thought of as being something that was separate to their discussions as a group. And if we're going to put it there, can we put some urgency that they do look at it and it gets on an agenda and it isn't just shelved? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Can I suggest that the committee, what we do is we start by any points we want to raise with Graham in relation to the CAB, and then we'll come back to the recommendations in the paper. Okay? So anything for CAB?
I wonder whether Graham would kindly comment on this issue of the credit union, whether you had any involvement with its welfare, should we say, and whether from your experience through links nationwide, there are things that you think we could do as a borough to assist on that. Because, you know, when one looks at what you've presented today, nearly everything, well, not nearly everything, but a large proportion has something to do with money. And to my mind, credit unions are a real potential for easing the responsible lending problems if one can get them really up and running properly and accessible.
We are in a position where we do have to be careful that we don't make any recommendations, because we're meant to be independent and impartial, but we do see credit unions as obviously a better source of loans as opposed to payday loaners. And of course, the argument for having payday loans is that there's loan sharks are the other alternative, and there are loan sharks operating in Basingstoke and Tadley, and that's something we need to be aware of. We did have a fairly close working relationship with the credit union at some stage. In fact, we did post them in the bureau on a Thursday afternoon. I think they were underutilised, however, but there were different accounts that I think going forward would really help. They talk about the jam jar account and that sort of thing, where money's put aside for rent and things like that. So there is a place. I don't have the national picture of what's happening in credit unions, I'm sorry to say, but I think there is definitely a place for some kind of alternative to loan sharks or payday loans.
From your experience, would you not agree, though, that accessibility is a key issue? You said they were underused. To me, it's sort of cause and effect. Why were they underused? Well, I think a lot of people who are in difficulty might be having difficulty finding the way around the web as well. And being able to go and talk to somebody is a much easier way to sort out problems than either through the web or even telephone calls sometimes, if you can get a caring person opposite, which is what you are about in so many ways. And even, I know you couldn't possibly say it, as far as I'm concerned, the banks are only mildly better than some of the payday loaners. So, you know, there needs to be an alternative.
We did do a survey 2 years ago of the general public, because we were keen to make sure that we were still meeting their advice needs and their access needs. And face-to-face came up very high in the list, that people, when they're stressed and when they don't really know what to do, they do appreciate the face-to-face contact. So I can affirm that, yes.
Anything else for CAB? Okay, what I suggest we do is there are however many recommendations go from A to L, and what I will do is, well, I'll say each letter, unless there's anybody got any points that are generic rather than related to one of the recommendations. Okay, well then we'll go. Yeah.
I have something that's rather more fundamental. I did notice that under the recommendations it says 2.1, and then little Roman 1 it says and nothing follows. Is that a typo or is something missing there?
Sorry, just to clarify, yeah, that was just a last minute switch in the formatting, so the and is irrelevant, yes.
Okay, and so if nobody has anything to say on any of the recommendations, I shall take that recommendation as agreed, and we'll just debate the ones on which somebody has something to say. So, A. Yes, Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. In light of the contribution from Councillor Harvey, I would like his points to be picked up and actioned upon. Yes, if we are going to refer this to the ethical team that we have put together, let's put it there, but can we, for want of a better phrase, light a fire under them? Can we get some activity going and get things moving quickly, please?
Yes, I think we could. I think we could express a view that we hope that there will be some. I'm trying to. A is the one that's going to be referred to the portfolio holder to request that the working party looks at it. Yes. I don't know whether the portfolio holder would like to give us an indication of when we might expect that to be completed by. And it's not this portfolio holder; it's one lurking behind there somewhere. If not, well, I presume it's property. Okay. Right. Well, does anyone not want to, as a committee, endorse the view that these things need to be progressed rapidly rather than slowly? Okay, fine. We will make that a general comment on things like that. We'd like to see some action. Anyone else on A? Councillor Taylor?
Aye. Do you think the council should start to look at restricting the payday loan companies using council property?
We think that's B.
Is it? Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. Oh, no. Anyone else? Anyone else got anything on A? No, because we're on to B. The paper, if the question was addressed to me, the paper sets out that it's not a straightforward thing. But I think the recommendation is that there should still be some more work done, and then that we will attach our rapidly rather than slowly to that as well.
Because there's other councils throughout the country that have put this policy in place, where they're restricting these companies to council-run properties and not letting them use them. So surely, as an ethical policy, the council should look at this.
Yeah, hang on. I think we are perhaps getting our way. So A is about the lettings policy, B is about the planning policy, and they're both aimed at the same thing, which is to restrict the ability of payday loans to function. I mean, the other thing we need, which it's not worth doing, but we needed to recognise that most payday loans are done telephone or online rather than through a shop, but there's certainly plenty of shops and they're doing plenty of business, so it's a significant issue. Councillor Miller.
Really, just to understand B, in the top of the commentary, you've got an Article A for direction. Article A for what? It could have been slightly expanded so we know what we're talking about.
I can't remember what it was, but I certainly remember about them because that was I'm sure Councillor Harvey's going to nod in, I hope he is. Anyway, that was what we were doing with houses of multiple occupation. Right, yes. So it's a well-established policy, but as the report says, you either have to give people a year's notice during which they can make representations, or if you bring it in more quickly than that, you have to pay compensation for anyone who loses out. I remember that much. So, I mean, the recommendation is that we want some comments on the potential implications of adopting such an approach. I mean, I think, we would like, I mean, I don't think we can make, I don't think we could say we definitely want to go ahead with it tonight, but we would certainly like to know what the implications are and to have this fed back to us fairly quickly, I think, is the sense around the table. Yeah, is that yeah?
Nobody's.
So that's a fourth portfolio holder who isn't here tonight planning, but we'll get under B. So
Give them all a jump.
give them all work. Yeah. C, which must be here somewhere. It's all right. C, the recommendation is on page 7 of 15. And this is the credit union one. Just to say, this has been around for a long time. I was on a members advisory panel years ago when we were looking at, before there was a credit union in Basingstoke at all, and we were working on that. And contrary to what Councillor Harvey implied, at one point we did offer them free premises in the town centre, and it coincided with a change in management in the credit union, and the new chief executive wasn't interested in that option at that stage, and it went away again. And there have been subsequent discussions. I know for a while Sentinel were taking a lead on it, and they even had one of their directors on the board of the credit union. And then the last time I was involved in discussions on this, Sovereign were taking a lead. And we've been fully plugged in as a council into all of this, and just so far it hasn't come together. And as the report makes clear, it's still shifting sands because the credit union is having a look at its thing. But the idea that a credit union readily accessible on the street in Basingstoke would be a good thing is, I think, uncontrovertible. And, I think the recommendation is right. We need to stay fully involved in the debate. And as they focus on what they want to do, we again have a go at seeing whether there's something that could be done within the town that enough people would support to make it viable in the long term. So, sorry, perhaps that was a bit of a heavy steer from the chair, but I was really very involved in this for many years. Any other comments on the credit union? Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. Within the recommendation, to me, the key point is that there's an action plan, which is actually what it says, that it's then measurable and we can see how things are progressing rather than just, as was hinted at, things get kept pushing into the long grass. So to me, the highlight of that is the action plan to come from the Cabinet member.
Which we would like as soon as possible after the credit union has decided on their way forward. Okay with C, with the urgency, and we'd like an action plan sooner rather than later. Okay. D, the recommendation is on page 18 of 182, that the committee notes the work currently undertaken by the council to support the use of community centres as a space for financial capability, training and support. Anything we want to do more than note that? Councillor Miller.
Again, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is aimed mainly, if we look at the top of page 8 of 15 or 18 of 182, family learning opportunities, community schools which contribute to the partnership. Just a quick bit of history. My wife used to teach mathematics in this city, late 70s, early 80s, and she initiated a program for, what do you call them now? Years 9 through 11 on money management. And it started at that age because in this day and age, young people of that age bracket get involved in financial trouble very early on. Because if they don't have their parents looking after them to get their mobile phones and paying their monthly tariffs for access to the internet, they themselves get very bad credit scores very early on. Now, as an initiative, as an example, it fizzled out because she tried to get it through to Hampshire. Hampshire wouldn't pick it up even 35 years ago. But it's something, I think, the earlier we start educating the generation on financial sensibility, if you will, then we won't have to play catch up again in the future, which is what we're doing now. This is trying to teach adults, for goodness sake, how to manage the money. And okay, you can say, I'm not blaming anybody, but it's a lack of education and awareness that should have started very much younger in their particular migration into adulthood. The trouble is, we're now getting a set of parents, unfortunately, that don't know how to manage money and can't pass it on to their children. And now you mentioned the community schools. I'm a governor of a community school. And it's something I would like to, I'll take back to my governing body to see if that is possible. The trouble is the curriculums are so tight these days, there's very little way in it to actually start it off. But that's something else that could be folded into this as identifying another avenue of trying to get the education started early.
Okay, anyone, right, this Greg?
I'd just like to say that financial capability training is something that we believe is very important as preventative. And we've done a lot of work with groups. And in the past, we've done work with schools. And one of the difficulties we've had is, as you say, the curriculum is very tight. But also what we found is, like, we went to Cranbourne and had some really good sessions where we got pupils to sort of come up with videos and things like that on that subject. And the teacher was very keen, but that teacher then left. And since then, we've hit a brick wall. So anything that we can do or can help us to get it, prevent that, we're very interested in.
So the issue is the availability of people, not the availability of space in community centres, essentially. So
we found it is the engagement of people, and actually sometimes it's better if you go along to an existing group or insist in something that's happening. And we've done quite a bit of work this year with other groups on this subject.
Councillor Beard?
Thanks. Can I just query whether, in fact, even secondary isn't too late, and whether you're not attached juniors as well? And have you tried that?
Yes, we have. We have tried juniors. We went to school in Popley and actually involved them in a game, basically, sort of saying, well, if you spend your money, pocket money in a certain way, or if you wash your car for your parents, or whatever, and earn some money, what would you do with it? Would you spend it on sweets, or would you save it? And if you saved it, could you get an Xbox? That sort of thing. So we have had that fun environment, but it goes back to actually having someone who's open to engage with you. So it's not, the difficulty is not engaging with the children or the location, it's the fact that these schools often don't have the time for it. That's our experience anyway.
Okay, so we're just content to note what's the situation on that one. Okay. E deals with publicity and the use of the website. Any comments on that? We just asked to note that again as well. That's progress. And given that a number of subjects will have to come back here, I hope that will exercise the minds of the portfolio holder and the publicity, that they need to keep the publicity going. Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. I've had a look at the website, and some of the buttons are quite good, but there's a couple there where you need to dig in quite deep to have a look at some stuff. So, for example, the basic bank account type stuff, you've got to drill into CAB, which is a link from our site, to go down. So it's not instantly, easy to find some of the things. I mean, some of the buttons could be a lot more clearer for people to, to access.
Okay, thank you. I think perhaps we could just comment generally. We'd like officers to keep an eye on how easily accessible the information is and make sure it remains as accessible as it is now and gets more accessible if possible. Thank you. Sometimes drilling down is the best way, because if you link to somebody who's going to keep it up to date, it's better than you having it out of date. But if we keep the pressure on, that'll be the right thing. F, this is council's bailiffs. Any comments on that? Well, I will comment, because my colleague from Money Lifeline came and spoke in February, and at my request raised the issue of our bailiffs, which I find a bit of a pain. So I would be grateful if we could actually note what's said here, and I'd be grateful that the council is committed that if the debts have gone to the bailiffs, that people say they are suffering financial problems, that will be put on hold for 6 weeks so that their advisors, whether it's CAB or us or whoever else is helping them, have chance to sort out suitable payment arrangements before the bailiffs come around, racking up huge costs for doing very little. So if people would actually, welcome this and say how pleased we are, and we look forward to it working out in practice, we'd be very pleased. Councillor Harvey, if you're very quick, because this is quite...
Could you extend that to our relationship with the housing associations and how they take their actions as well? That would be a good move.
Well, this was bailiffs, but I think housing associations come later. But yeah. G. The committee notes the limitations of both the Gambling Commission and licensing authorities to set different limits or further expand or restrict the categories of machine that are permitted. Councillor Cousin.
Thank you, Chair. Again, further to Councillor Harvey's contribution, could we look at putting this to the policy arm of the licensing committee for it to check the gambling policies that we have in place, please?
I'd like to ask the portfolio holder to comment on that, if she doesn't mind.
Okay, we've only just changed the gambling policies under new legislation, and I think the officer's done quite a given detail here about the restrictions that are in place. So trying to refer it when we've got, I don't know if the officer's got anything further to say, but we have said here that we are the limitations that we've got, and we have just renewed the gambling policy quite recently. And I know that this is a very specialist area, and the officer hasn't just put this together, he has checked with licensing where we are.
Can I get the officer go first and then you can come back? The officer wants to say anything?
I haven't got particularly anything to add on top of that. Thanks.
Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. It was just purely my understanding that, amongst other things, the licence had changed from a 3-year review to a 5-year review. So it was, when was it last reviewed? That's the point I'm getting at. I'm certainly not implying that the officer has purely made it up off his own back. He has definitely gone and checked. I just want
I
to
didn't say that you said you made it up.
Can I just get clear? Are you saying it's the review period for individual licenses is extended, or the review period for the policy has extended?
The review for the policy, I understand, has extended from 3 to 5. So my question is really, when was the last time it was checked? You know, and that's the bit I just want clearing up.
The portfolio holder's answer was recently, but if we want a precise thing, I'm sure she could provide a note after the.
I can check, but I'm quite certain that our gambling policy was last year. Certainly, when I was the portfolio holder, which hasn't been that long. So I'm sure it was last year, but I can certainly double check that and come back to you.
Right. Okay. So subject to if it is last year, can I suggest it probably we shouldn't ask them to do the work again. We're setting a lot of work for officers and bits of the council, which I'm happy to endorse. But I suspect that one is one we should, if it's just been done, not ask them to redo. You okay with that? Okay. H, we must be on, I think, now. The committee notes the information provided about basic bank accounts and that if residents are facing further difficulties, more information is available at the Money Advice Service. Do we want to do anything more than note? Yes, Councillor Westbrook.
Is this a recommendation this link's added to the site? Because it's not in the site as far as I could see. Is this what is planned to go on to the web page, this link? Because I couldn't find that one either. So.
You get your light on stuff.
Sorry.
The answer is I don't know whether I did find the information very easily, but I can't remember whether I took it out of the report or off the website. So we will add to our website thing that if there isn't an easy link to the stuff on basic bank accounts, that we make sure that's there. Basic bank accounts are very valuable. I occasionally recommend my clients to go and get one. None of them have yet come back and said that the banks have refused, though I gather you sometimes have to talk fairly firmly to the bank to insist that you get one. I don't know whether Graham has experience of any of our banks failing in their obligations to provide them. Can't name names.
Actually, I'm sorry, but because I don't get involved in the advice process, I don't really have first-hand knowledge of that, but I've not heard of any problems.
Okay, yeah, I think it's there, and as long as we all know about it and recommend it to people, it's just anyone who, having been guilty of fraud, it should be the only reason why, or are made bankrupt, why you can't get a basic bank account. I, on page 22 of 182, that the council continues to work closely with Basingstoke CAB to monitor and support where possible the work done with local volunteers through the existing revenue grant monitoring procedures. Graham, anything you'd like to say about?
Well, volunteers are very important to us, and I think it's also very important to the community because obviously there's lots of well-being issues with that. So I'm very grateful. I think, say, B aren't alone in the fact that there has been a shift in the availability of the volunteers. So anything that can help push volunteering, I think, would be much appreciated.
And then if you come across any specific ideas that you think we could do to help, we're planning to invite you back every 6 months. So let us know next time you come back, or even sooner if you need to. But okay, so we're okay with that one. J, that the committee notes the information provided in regards to the Smarter Buy scheme and discuss the feasibility of a similar scheme to particular circumstances of the borough. I guess we're going to want to add our as quickly as possible rider to that one. Anything else we want to say on it? No, okay. I think Councillor Harvey was right. I mean, we need to see it sounds like a good scheme. We should see to what extent it could be promoted more widely and available more widely. K, that the committee notes the current work undertaken by the council in developing guidance to community organisations offering access to public computers. Anything else we think we can do apart from the guidance? Any kind? It seems sensible to me. I think we're happy with that one. L, this is where we get the housing associations, I think. This was about the high level of housing possession orders, which would include the housing associations as well as private landlords. And that has been referred somewhere else. Housing and overview, and it's now within the commissioning outcome group on preventing homelessness, which seems like a good home for it, unless anyone wants to suggest anything else. Okay, so I think we're pleased that work's going forward. Yes, Portfolio Health.
Julia, the officer's just confirmed that the gambling policy went to full council last May. So it was just over a year ago, but it was last year.
Fine, thank you. Anything else before we move on to the next item? I think that's, so I hope the officers were writing down our different comments, and we don't need to read them back because I think we're fairly tight for time tonight, if that's all right, officers. Yes. Okay, we're moving on. So paper C is a Basingstoke Live update, but if you look on the very back page of the agenda, you'll see that tonight's work programme was actually Basingstoke Live and Basingstoke Festival. So I hope we're going to get some feedback on both. And people swap round. Just to emphasise for the committee and our one public speaker, this is the backward look. This is just a factual report on how things went this year. The interesting bit will be COG 1 when we get to talk about the future. And so we will, and that will be different officers who are responsible for that. So these officers and this portfolio holder, Councillor Osserton, are here to talk to us about what happened this year. And we can ask them questions about that, but the future we will cover in the next item on the agenda. Okay, Kathy, I think it's you.
Yes, good evening, committee. Right, okay. This report was requested by the committee to provide them with an update on the festival, or the current position of Basingstoke Live and its context within Basingstoke Festival, and I will be talking about the festival as well. It sets out the background and context of the event, updates on what has happened in 2014, and shows the added value and return on investment generated by the event. It also sets out plans for 2015 within the commissioning programme. The outcomes for 2014, and the slides will follow. The figures were provided by an independent research carried out on site by De Montfort University in 2014, using a representative sample of 504 people. Basingstoke Live is in its 8th year. The weather was good again in 2014, and numbers were similar to 2013. Okay. This event was organised by the council in partnership with the Forum, who programmes the various stages, showcasing local bands and different styles of music. And again, when they started, they had 3 stages. Now they've moved to 5. 33,000 people attended, as I've said, organised by Basingstoke, with a programmed by Basingstoke Live Forum. The weekend attracts a diverse audience of ages as well as musical tastes. And from the slide you can see that 43% were aged under 25, 47% were aged 25 to 59, and wow, 10% were aged over 60. So it is diverse. Since I took over as portfolio holder, and we've had two, I've certainly noticed that Live has built up, as has the festival, a loyal audience of local residents and visitors. From the regional profile, we see that 33% were from outside of Basingstoke and 19% are from non-RG postcodes. Repeat visitors, 33% were first-time visitors, 67% were repeat visitors, 29% returned for the third or fourth time, and 7% had attended all 8. De Montfort University also modelled and estimated the economic value of the event. There's also additional income for catering stalls at the event. Then there is also a large amount of volunteers, large number of volunteers, time given to the event by the forum and others. With the finances, as you can see, 94,900 cost to the council. That doesn't include the staff, the 2 staff members. The return of investment was the audience spent, as you can see, between 7,000 and 20. Between 284 and 981 is spent on the local economy. And between 94,000 and 324,000 is spent by visitors. The added value is an additional 73% is contributed to the event through income generation and voluntary contributions. Some of the feedback that we've had, the best free live music that people have ever seen or heard. We felt safe just to chill and enjoy the sounds and Basingstoke community spirit. This was a good family event, and it's turning much more, I think, now into a family event, because certainly last year and the year before, there were quite a few, well, I could say quite a lot of families present, enjoying themselves, listening to the music and having picnics. And crime has remained low at the event. Basingstoke Festival. The festival first took place in June to July in 2012. It contributes from 37 different from 37 different organisations. It provides 89 separate events and 34 venues, many of which have multiple performances. 2014 included 109 separate events attracting audiences from within and beyond the borough, over 150,000 including lives. And I must thank all those that had worked with Basingstoke Festival and Basingstoke Live to make it such a success in 2014. It also will be going forward in 2015. In 2014, we had additional street theatre at weekends around the town. This was appreciated by quite a lot of the residents that I spoke to at the top of town on the Sunday. Basingstoke Festival, the total spend per head was between £48 to £56, with £21 to £25 of that being off-site spends. 21% of those people were tourists to Basingstoke. 64% of attendees said they were irregular attendees of arts events in the borough, suggesting the festival is attracting a new audience. Since February 2014, the events service, including Basingstoke Festival, has been participating in the commissioning outcome, which is COG1. These sessions are considering the provision of arts and culture of the borough. The team has worked closely with the commissioning strategy team to put a proposal forward that focuses on the outcomes currently delivered by the service, demonstrating the added value and return on investment that it delivers. It also considers how it could adapt in the future to be more flexible, create greater freedom to explore new ventures, and potentially become more financially sustainable through the setting up of a trading account. But this, as the chairman quite correctly said, is under COG1, which is the subject of another report on the agenda this evening. And as I've said before, planning for Basingstoke Live and Basingstoke Festival for 2015 will continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey, you're down to speak on this one as well, please.
Thank you, Chair.
4 minutes.
I'd like to start, Chair, by just taking us back to 2012 and where we were with the concerns that were raised by residents and by organisations and by those involved in Basingstoke Live, and where we've got to, really, where we come to with this report, because it's quite a journey. And that journey has involved all those groups. It's involved the cabinet member. It's involved those members of the advisory panel that supported the cabinet member in bringing forward the proposals. And I say, working with the voluntary groups and the community groups that make Basingstoke Live what it is, alongside our professional officer team, who are exceptional. I think the important points to draw out of the report, and I draw to the committee's attention, I think, is the visitors to the town. Look at what this festival, look at what this event does for Basingstoke and Deane on the map. Look at its regional success. Look at the way it's organised and what it offers, because it's quite unique. And I think the format of it, in the way that it is developed, in the way that it's become unique, underpins the success that's written in this report. I know that the young people of Basingstoke, amongst all those other age groups, but I know the young people of Basingstoke through their forums were very angry, very, very angry with what they saw might have not been the future of this event back in 2012. And I know the cabinet member made promises to them and met with those groups. And it was important that you did. And what I'd like to see and what I'd like to understand really in whatever happens is that those promises that were made to the young people of Basingstoke are honoured and kept, because it is their event as much as anybody else's. I think the evidence that's presented in this report is very important, reflecting upon the professionalism of our staff, and that's really where I'd like to end. I think the way that they've gone about organising this event, and I think the way that the drum runners and the other groups have come together to make this what it is exceptional. So, Chair, this is a really good report, and it shows us the journey we've been on, and it shows us what an amazing success both the festival and Basingstoke Live are in their current form.
We'll pick up the question about the promises to the young people when we come into COG1 and the future. Councillor Laura James. You can, yes. That you are only down for the other one.
Thank you. What I wanted to say in looking at that presentation tonight, what an amazing event that we have. And I remember my son saying when he had Googled about this festival that it is one of the only festivals in the country that is free and of this size. And also I want to say that a lot of people within my own ward and other wards are able to come to an event like this because it's free. There are people who wouldn't normally be able to access an event, or maybe never ever see live music because they can't afford to see live music, be able to experience and enjoy that day. There are people within our wards that never ever leave those wards in the summer. They never go out. They never actually go away. But this is an opportunity for them to enjoy something different and to see and experience new things. There are also people that went to that event that had opportunities to play music and take part that would never normally be able to take part. And I think that we should really pat ourselves on the back and with the community for what has been achieved. And this is an amazing event. It's free to the town. It attracts enormous amount of people over 2 days with very little problem. There was only one complaint that took place. And I think that we also need to really recognise what an exceptional staff we have and what they have achieved working in partnership with the community to achieve this. This is a community event and it's come from the ground. We have supported that from the ground up and I think we need to just recognise that. And it's a very special event and there are lots of young people, as you can see, nearly 43% of them were young, but it also, as the cabinet member said this time round, families came along and enjoyed the event over the 2 days. And so, you know, please recognise this, and I think that we need to really give enormous praise to everyone who took part and a big thank you for what they did, because they've generated a lot of income that's come into this town. And a lot of people have spent a lot of money and also visited this town that maybe wouldn't have done so. So thank you very much to everyone who's been involved.
Thank you. Personally, I think the facts from the report and the presentation speak for themselves. These were both hugely successful events of which the town can be justly proud. Any questions? We'll do questions or comments. Questions, sorry, for the portfolio holder or officers. Councillor Bown.
I mean, I think the report's wonderful, and you know, obviously the event's gone down very well. It was 3.9.1.2, whatever that is. It's page 48 of 182. I was just a bit flummoxed by the figures. There's 720,000 spent up to 1,900,000, and then of this, between 284,000 and 981,000 is being spent off-site. That seems an awful wide margin to me. I'm
sure the officer will be happy to comment.
The research was conducted independently. They gather the data from people giving the figures that they spend on and off-site at the event, and then there are models that apply to come up with the calculations. One of the reasons the levels are the gap is so diverse is because the lower estimate is representative of everybody. Is given an average amount that they spend, and if they didn't specify, they spent nothing. The upper amount only includes responses where people specified zero spend on the average of those responses. Does that make sense? It's quite a complex thing.
Just say it's model or estimate.
It's just a margin.
It's according to, it's where some people if they didn't answer the question, then the lower estimate takes the average of all those people who didn't answer the question, even though it's assumed that they probably did spend something. So they may have spent something, not answered the question. The upper margin is only dealing with those that answered with a figure to both. So that's why it's so diverse. Sorry.
Thank you. We got that second time round. Good. Any more questions for officers or the portfolio holder? Okay, we're invited to note the report. I'm sure we're capable of doing that. Anything we want to say in addition to noting it? Again, for the moment, focusing on what happened this year rather than what's going to happen next year and beyond. Go on, Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. Reading this report makes me incredibly happy. So, first of all, thank you to the officer for writing this report. I take my mind back to 2012 and standing outside on a rather cold November, December night with 100 other people making a hell of a lot of noise outside before a committee meeting because we were all that passionate about we wanted to keep this event. With a lot of toil, we got there and we've kept the event, and we got it for 2013 and it was a rip-roaring success. And again, we've managed to keep it for 2014. Kept it for 2014, and again it was a rip-roaring success. That success not only goes down to our own officers, of which thank you, but it also goes to the drum runners, it goes to the Basingstoke Live Forum, it goes to our local, it goes to the acts that played, it goes to the people that attended. It is this is something that we are incredibly proud of as a borough. It's something that I know we'll discuss in future in a minute, and I've certainly got some views which I won't be shy of sharing with you all. But it is just an opportunity to say thank you very much for an incredible event, and from my point in particular, long may it continue.
Okay, committee, we note the report, and shall we add our corporate collective thanks to the officers for their part in organising it? Thank you. Okay, well done. Right, now thank you very much. We're now going to move on to commissioning and outcome groups, but the paper specifically several times mentions grants and applying for grants. So what I've asked is that the officers responsible for the grants paper will give us their presentation first, but we won't discuss it. We'll just get the presentation so we know when the COG paper talks about grants, what is being proposed for grants, and then we will come back to the COG paper, have the presentation, have the public speaking, and have what I'm sure will be an interesting debate. So, I think we have Dawn and Mark. Have I got that right somewhere? Yes, right. Okay. And so this is just the facts of what is proposed for grants, and then we'll get back to COG1. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report presented tonight proposes a revised process for the revenue grant funding. In December 2013, the Commissioning Strategy team began a planned review of the Revenue Grants Award and Performance Management process. The review incorporated the recommendations from a Council internal audit that reported at the same time. The audit highlighted a number of areas for improvement. This proposed scheme aligns with all of those recommendations from the audit and also offers a significantly improved process for both the Council and those funded organisations. There are two core elements to the Revenue Grants Award scheme.
Okay, we're just asking the officers to move the microphone a bit closer because we're getting signals from the back. I think a bit closer again, probably. Thank you.
Don't normally have that problem. There are two core elements to the Revenue Grants Award scheme, namely strategic grants and programme grants, and these are structured around four principles set out under Section 5 within the body of the report. Both strategic and programme grants are based upon National Audit Office principles of grant funding. Some key points to note around the difference between strategic and programme. Strategic grants we're looking at for being over £20,000 for up to a period of 5 years, and it's the whole organisation that's performance managed. For programme grants, it's up to a maximum of £20,000. They can be up to 3 years in term. Organisations can apply for more than one grant, and it is only the funded programme that's performance managed, not the whole organisation. Some of the key benefits to this revised process are that grants are focused on delivery that aligns to council plan priorities and outcomes. There is an improved application process and performance monitoring arrangements that support that. Grant-funded programmes will be focused on specific, relevant and local activities that add real value to communities. Funding agreements will provide more financial stability for those organisations, and it also provides opportunities for a more diverse range of organisations to apply through wider promotion and accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's set the background, and we will ask these officers back, obviously, when we get on to discussing the paper. But I think for that, so now we will ask, and I think we've got onto our third Cabinet member for the evening, Councillor Isaac's joined us, who is going to introduce the COG1 paper with a quick swap round of officers, and then we'll have the contributions from members of the public and visiting councillors. Okay, Councillor Isaac.
Good evening, committee and everyone. The COG1 paper introduces the recommendations of the Commissioning Group 1 on arts and culture and summarises the process followed. The objective was and I'm quoting now, is what could the council be doing itself and with its partners to deliver a range of arts and culture activities that are attractive and give value for money for the borough. What is commissioning in the context of arts and culture about? It's about providing services and outcomes that residents need now and in the future. It's about services being delivered in the most efficient and appropriate way, and it's about transparent, measurable and deliverable value for money. It's also about opportunities for all, irrespective of age, gender, race, religion and background. It's also about challenging ourselves and working together with those individuals and groups most active in arts and culture to look at current provision and to see how it could be improved. It's not accepting the status quo on provision and funding indefinitely. It's about the council wanting to support and encourage a vibrant arts and culture scene in the borough, not funding a static, unchanging structure and content. It's about encouraging the best, most creative arts and culture groups and helping them achieve greater, longer-term financial independence where merited, so that they can secure additional grant funding elsewhere and generate their own income. Yes, it's getting away from the culture of grant dependency and non-competitive bidding, an absence of self-sustaining independent financing that was identified by the commissioning outcome group. These recommendations do underscore the increasing financial pressures on Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. And just as we've had to make savings, £7.7 million over the past 5 years and a further £1.65 million to find through to 2018 and 19 to balance the budget, I think it's reasonable on behalf of our residents, and it's their money that is being used to fund arts and culture grants, that we look to our arts and culture partners to do likewise. As a council, we must be mindful in the use of scarce financial resources to direct these to where our residents tell us they see service priorities. Their priorities are about housing and dealing with homelessness, public transport, better street parking, continued prevention of crime and antisocial behaviour. Although 70% say they are very satisfied or very satisfied or fairly satisfied with our cultural offer, it ranks low down their list of council service priorities. The administration recognises that our arts and culture partners play an important part in helping to make the borough such a great place to live and work. Their contribution brings in significant sums of money, as we've heard with the previous report, from outside visitors, and they do so much in terms of reaching out to our young people through their educational work, and also to those in rural communities with limited access to arts and culture, and those dealing with health and ageing issues. Much of this work does not receive the recognition it deserves. They warrant our continuing support, and this is reflected in the long-standing position of this borough as one of the country's top contributors per head to arts and culture. Last year we spent 2.326 million on arts and culture funding. I'd like to say something here about the commissioning group members. I'm grateful to those of you who gave freely of your time this year to participate. That was 18 organisations and 45 individuals. Your ideas, 212 in total, have framed the recommendations contained in this report. So a big thank you for all of your good work. You've helped to make a pioneering way of approaching grant funding a success, I believe. I'm not going to go into the detail at this point on the recommendations, but will be happy to answer any questions from committee members. In general, I think they represent some challenging and innovative proposals that will sustain and develop the first-class arts and culture scene here for our residents. It is worth stating that these are recommendations at this stage and not decisions. I come here tonight, of course, to listen to the constructive views of fellow councillors and others so that we can do our collective best to achieve the right outcomes for our residents and for the arts and culture scene. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have the visiting speakers and then we'll come back to questions and then debate. So I'm going to take the speakers in the order in which they're on the bit of listed on the bit of paper I've got in front of me. So we'll start with a bit of a drum roll. If Paul Midgley would like to come to the front. It's all right, you needed to wake up a bit, you know. It's and after that it's Sushmita, so she can get ready. Right, technically it's 2 minutes, try not to go too far over. Big button.
Okay, many thanks for inviting me to talk, and hello again. My name's Paul, I'm from the Drum Runners and we represent the Basingstoke Life Forum. We're a cooperative of promoters in partnership with the council and local communities. 2014 was the 8th festival, evolving from grassroots. Developing each year, it is programmed with over 140 acts, 500 plus performers and many different genres of music. 30,000 people attend annually, attracting local and regional audiences, a huge highlight in the calendar of Basingstoke. More than 80% of the acts are local, infrastructure and content are locally sourced. It reaches a lot of the council's priorities and objectives, which are often not seen because we don't have the resources, because we're not continually funded to sort of look at all the measures all the time. Generations mingle and interact freely at the festival. Life breaks down social boundaries. Low-income families comment on how great it is to have a family day out. The event creates aspirations in our young people, and it's an opportunity to learn and show their craft in its right setting. Under 18s rarely get a chance to perform on this scale due to age restrictions in venues. There are more opportunities to play as a result of live. Venues are now more supportive. Forum members actively produce music events all year, inspiring new talent. It has gained huge respect in and outside of the borough due to professionalism, attitude and artistic direction. Feedback from our national and international headliners is glowing. Each year we have co-produced a live brand enabling positive changes in our community, the best possible value for money and a great example of best practice. There is a sense of ownership. The town feels they are part of live. It is evolved by a unique set of circumstances, driven by strong relationships. Live is based on the forum's local and national knowledge and experience. It brings together a true representation of music, arts and culture, performed and supported by local people. The sheer quality is rarely seen at a freer festival. Many people, not just the forum, give a large amount of time to live. People have grown with live. It brings people together with a purpose. Basingstoke Live is embedded in the borough. The format is successful and it has been proven again and again that it works. We can't find another that delivers the same pride and results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we have Sushmita Party, and after that it's Mary Swan, if Mary'd like to get ready. Okay, you have 2 minutes or slightly more if you need it.
Thank you. I'm Sushmita Bhatti from Kala the Arts. We have been operating in Basingstoke since last 15 years, but I've lived here for last 20 years. Kala the Arts is educational organization. Currently we are based at BCOT and we're working with them in partnership since the last 1.5 years. We are also a main cultural provider for South Asian dance in Hampshire, and now we are developing Asian music as part of our repertoire. Also, Kala the Arts is a pioneer in actually bringing a dance form called Odissi into this country 27 years ago. And the dance form has sort of flourished, and we have nearly about 300 students across. Our students range from 4 years to adults, and also 50 plus as well. Our students also are local, they're also international. Currently, we are having students from France and Germany coming and learning with us because of the specialization we provide. Most of our work is in education and communities. Since the organization has been in operation, we have worked with nearly 250 schools in Hampshire. We have also worked in schools in London and the Southeast as well. And recently, because of regular demand from the South Asian communities, which has been growing in Basingstoke, we've started classes in live vocal singing, drumming and dance. And that has been to develop skills, also encouraging students to take examinations, raising their aspirations within the community, enriching, bringing diverse arts and culture to the local communities, and in some cases, local communities creating their identity through the work. And in some particular cases, also just informing the local communities, particularly predominantly South Asian communities, that the art has to be led by professionally trained people. Because if they've come from a particular part of the world, just community has a certain level of expectations, and we are able to inspire them to raise the standards and the bars so that we can provide a world-class education in the borough. And then the borough can be proud of its achievements and a brand. And I think that's all I'm here to say.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's Mary Swan, and next will be Daniel O'Loughlin, so you can be getting ready.
Hello, I'm Mary Swan, I'm Artistic Director of Proteus. We are thrilled that the Council has endorsed our work at the Proteus Creation Space through the recommendation of 5-year funding agreement and the pump prime one-off injection of £35,000 for 2015-2016. But we need to be absolutely clear that Proteus does not consist of two organisations. Proteus Theatre Company and Proteus Creation Space are one organisation. The operation of the Creation Space is dependent on the earned income created by the theatre company activities, some £331,000. That's 71% of our turnover. Put simply, the funding of just the Creation Space only enables us to cover the cost of physically opening the building and maintaining it. Anything that happens within it, that's including income generation, is dependent on the theatre company and its staff. Therefore, the recommendation of a 100% cut to Proteus Theatre Company of our current £65,000 grant core funding actually represents a 63% cut overall to Proteus and its activities across the borough. And that includes working with people in isolated areas, people with disabilities, or those who simply cannot afford to attend a traditional theatre. However, I would like to thank the commissioning team, Councillor Isaac and Councillor Osterton, for swiftly assuring us that this potentially disastrous outcome was an unintended consequence of the recommendations. We've worked closely over the last few days with the commissioning team and are discussing with Councillor Isaac and Councillor Osterton a revised recommendation based on a suggested proposal that Proteus receives strategic funding over 5 years for the whole business. We fully understand the need to decrease levels of public subsidy, and to that end we are modelling our budget to reflect a reduction beginning at 5%, rising to 10% by year 5. Without this commitment, we would be simply unable to operate or to secure other sources of investment, which could potentially mean less reliance on public funding in the longer term. We will continue to work closely with the Council to arrive at an arrangement that enables Proteus to deliver the outcomes the borough demands from its cultural provision, whilst also creating a healthy, strong and sustainable business. This continued long-term commitment to the excellence and value of money Proteus represents will ensure we're able to provide high-quality, affordable, accessible and unique cultural experiences for all borough residents, creating a vibrant, confident and enviable borough. I would like to thank all of you and all of you for our continued support. Thank you.
Thank you. We will, I'm sure, want to talk specifically about Proteus in due course. I hope you'll still be here because we might want to ask you back to the front there. I didn't follow all the detail of that, but we will pick it up when we get to the discussions. Okay, it's Daniel O'Loughlin, and after that it's Joanna Ridout, or Ridout. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Cathy Austin. I think she gave a really good presentation there, and also to the officers that wrote that. I honestly think Cathy Austin is a supporter of Basingstoke Live. Dealings in the past, she has always been very positive about the positive contributions it has to our borough. I'm a little bit feeling deja vu. Here we go again, ever so slightly, when we talk about the future of it. As well as that, Cathy clearly obviously said about the continued growth of the festival in 2012 and in 2013 and 14. But just listening to some of the comments there from Councillor John Isaac there, just regarding stagnant and unchanging culture within Basingstoke, I would very much disagree with that, and I'm sure many of the members of the community would very much disagree with that. One of the great things about Basingstoke Live is its continuing changing of acts and continuing changing of people that are in, as Cathy mentioned, with the increased amount of families going to it. I think it's one of its absolute strengths in the format that it's currently in. I was very disappointed to see when I saw it in the local news there the other day with the head of this council, clearly making a decision, well, we keep Basingstoke Live or we build affordable housing was kind of the remit he was going on. And I very much, that kind of divide kind of argument going on. Well, this is what our members want, and all the rest of the community wants, and all this goes with it. I honestly feel there is councils like Goston, like Costins and Port Harvey and others that do get how important Basingstoke Live is to very, very many members of this community. It is something that is unique. It is something that is not replicated in many other parts of England down here. Basingstoke sometimes is the butt of many jokes, good old boring joke and all the rest that goes with it. But it's very nice to have one weekend where we can say, we are Basingstoke. We have something that is the envy of other towns and boroughs within. Just finishing up now, Chair. And one thing I'd very much just like to highlight is I'm concerned where obviously with Cathy there on a presentation was very clearly selling the very strong merits of Basingstoke Live in its current format. Then, almost maybe I'm taking this the wrong way, but just from what Councillor John Aston sent a very different view of it. Maybe I heard it the wrong way. I don't know. I need to read up a little bit more on some of the things possibly he's been mentioning. But it concerns me, and what concerns me even more is how people will be put off by this. People will get angry by this. When we're encouraging people to get involved, write to your councillors, talk to your councillors. Councillor Steele, the old cabinet minister, cabinet holder, again, listening to us. And now we're kind of coming again where people feel it's under threat. And I think it's important that councillors fully understand this. I know Councillor Miller thinks young people are financially incompetent. I'm a young man myself. Maybe I am, I don't know. But there's more to this value of this than just money. Excellent.
That was slightly a minute over the time, so that was why I was thinking, that's all right. I was just needing to slow you down at the very end there. And then after Joanna, it's Raz Russell. So thank you.
Hello, I come to you as Chair of Basingstoke Cultural Forum, so representing all the cultural organisations and our questions about this paper. I was heartened to read Councillor Isaac's comments, and we share his wish for sustaining an inspiring and buoyant arts and cultural scene in Basingstoke. Cultural professionals have been working hard with officers through the COG process, and together we've offered around 60 days of expertise on a voluntary basis. We've had just 5 working days to consider our responses, so I'm offering some initial comments and questions alongside more comprehensive dialogue that, as we've heard, is going on elsewhere. How realistic are the timescales offered in terms of planning and sustaining provision, particularly with events and festivals? What would the impact be of other public funders withdrawing support if they felt Basingstoke's investment was uncertain? I urge members to scrutinise the accuracy of some of the desk research, including numbers, relevance of comparators, and other public funding. How do members define commerciality and balance that with the range of cultural provision Basingstoke actually wants? What will be the impact of a substantial 2, 10 and then 2% cut in museums and galleries for Basingstoke? Proteus's theatre company's proposed devastating cut, we're pleased to hear, will hopefully be averted with a strategic solution. It seems that the recommendations for Basingstoke Live and Basingstoke Festival seem to largely ignore the sense of place, the professional, creative and community input that makes them unique. A few suggestions for how we could work together. Transparency about the level of savings actually needed in Basingstoke budgets, so we can work with professionals towards known targets together and more effectively. Addressing concerns from providers about over-reliance on a very new, uncertain and potentially flawed COG process. A risk assessment of the true social, commercial and long-term impacts on Basingstoke and its residents if swift, radical cuts are made. Clarity on alternative routes Basingstoke can offer to help bridge gaps, such as knowing how much is in the new programme and strategic grants budgets. Finally, I'd like to say that we'd like to work towards a collaborative 5-year model of lessening funding dependence, rather than a potentially devastating model over 5 months, allowing time for joint planning, building new partnerships, and developing new business models for the cultural provision we all value so highly together. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Russell. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'll get my notes. I am a self-proclaimed amateur historian. I'm not an expert yet, but my research thus far has told me enough about the Basingstoke music scene over 5 decades to know that Basingstoke Live is far and away the best thing we've ever had. I would like to have amused you all with the Gazette's accounts of previous disastrous attempts to stage outdoor concerts in Basingstoke, but I just don't have the time. In the 8 years during which Basingstoke Live has evolved and flourished, we have seen an unprecedented level of cooperation between the council and the people, and that's one of the reasons it's been a huge success. We identified a common goal and we scored. The value of Basingstoke Live to the town's teen generation is inestimable. Both BCOT and QMC have state-of-the-art facilities and they are bulging with talented kids. For 8 years, those kids have had something to aspire to. For 8 years, it's been worthwhile forming a band. If you kill Basingstoke Live, you'll have a brain drain and all your students will take their skills to London or wherever they have to go because their hometown no longer has anything to offer them. I have to say, I was disappointed to hear the local TV station report that Basingstoke Live is in some way a barrier to the resolution of the problem of homelessness. I personally do not believe that the problem of homelessness will be solved simply by slashing the borough's arts budget. I was also disappointed to read the slogan, more for less, which stands in lieu of any practical suggestion as to how a massive success like Basingstoke Live could be improved. It is insulting to the team of people who have made Basingstoke Live what it is to suggest that they're not doing enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Now we come to visiting councillors. Whilst I've been very tolerant on the 2-minute limit for the residents, which I always think is rather small, the 4-minute limit for councillors is very generous, so please don't expect the same generosity on that. So, Councillor Harvey, you're top of the list.
Thank you, Chair. I had lots of thoughts about what I wanted to say tonight after reading the report, listening to what's been said by councillors in the Cabinet so far. And I guess the starting point for me is, what in the world has all of this actually been about? You've spent months and hundreds of thousands of pounds on a COG process, to the point where you produce a set of recommendations that aren't the product of the COG. Let's be clear about that. They are not the product of the COG. They are your conclusions based on the discussions that the COG had. That's a very different thing. And then at the 11th hour, you start negotiating with individual groups because they are concerned about the implications. Let's just think about that. If it comes down to individual negotiations to try and save some of these organisations, where in the world were you not discussing and directing and engaging with them in the first place? If it takes an 11th hour intervention from Destination Basingstoke to say, hey guys, we could do the live, but I'll tell you what, it's going to cost you. And more than that, it's going to be involving income generation in a way that will fundamentally change the nature of Basingstoke Live. What is this COG process all about? I genuinely am concerned about our team of commissioning officers being put in the position of writing reports without the expertise to write about housing or transport or all of these. Now let's just think about that. If these conclusions are going to come from these groups, they have to come from the groups. And the one thing the commissioning COGs have not done is seen this report. 5 working days from one of the speakers this evening telling us she's had it for 5 working days to review the conclusions. So the COG has not been involved in what you're presented with as options or recommendations. The idea of everything being competitive and putting it out to competitive tender is a concerning thing when you're talking about some of these groups and organisations. Simply making them bid against each other from whatever programme funding might be available is not the right way to go about running an arts and culture sector in Basingstoke. That kind of competition might be ideologically up your street, but it isn't the right way to actually make our arts and culture sector work for our town and for our borough. And let's just think about Basingstoke Live for a moment. I know you questioned the figures. Now you talked about, whether the 720 and the 1.5 and 1.9 million, but that is a reality. 33,000 people coming into an event and spending money in our town centre. The arts and cultural sector are a fundamental part of our local economy. It's not as if they stand alone. It's not as if it's something we do just because we like to do it or it's nice. Yes, it is. But they make a contribution to our community, our society and our economy. And woe betide us if we start making stupid comparisons like the leader of the council did between, if you don't fund this, we may not be able to fund homelessness. Well, you don't fund homelessness as it is, let alone doing other issues to do with the arts sector. And if you are making them compete against each other for funding and for how you're going about this, then the real issue is, who loses out? Is it Central Studios, because Proteus are supported? What happens to the other arts groups like Cara of the Arts that haven't had a look in to start with? Where do you begin with any of this? And the COG process, I have to say, is fundamentally flawed, because the process has not led these organisations to be with you at this moment in time, supporting the recommendations, because you're changing them on the hoof. You're changing them at the 11th hour without a serious, detailed piece of evidence. You cannot, in the Basingstoke Live proposals, identify where the savings will come from and what they're about. But you say, I think over the next few years we can make 63% savings. It's not good enough. It's not how we should be doing business as an authority. It's a fundamentally flawed process. And my final point is the 2.6 members of staff who we have in the events team, whose jobs are now under direct threat by what is proposed as these recommendations, show us what we can do across all of these events. Yet we've got 6 members of staff who are specifically employed by this council at the moment to do commissioning, to outsource our services and to make our council staff, other council staff, redundant. And I find that disgraceful.
Thank you. Councillor Diane Taylor. And then it's Councillor Nigel Pearce.
Sorry, I was rather a long way away.
Sorry, I should have given you a warning. Yeah. Here you go.
Just to say, I'm attending specifically to give a voice to the group Carl of the Arts, of which I'm the councillor on the representative on the board. However, my points are also broader than just
one organisation. Having said that, I'd just like to begin by saying, just on the specific subject of dance, that if we're to achieve the COG Aim 5 of outcomes for people, which I quote, arts and cultural activities enhance the health and well-being of local people, it does make sense to encourage local people to be involved in dance and movement where possible. Dance is a great alternative to sport in promoting physical fitness and well-being. And whilst I appreciate the COG excluded dance academies from their remit, dance in schools, colleges, with the elderly and other groups is an excellent way to encourage healthy lifestyles and improve the health of local people and children. So much more beneficial than sitting in a theatre and simply watching it. My first main point is this. I think that we have to recognise in some way as we deliberate the significant change in demographic that's taken place over the last 20 years. We've now a sizable population from non-British ethnicities, and perhaps more importantly, there's now a far greater general interest and appreciation of the art, music and culture of other countries. Point 3 of the COG's outcome for play states that Basingstoke-on-Deane is a place of thriving local cultural and social diversity that is shared and embraced by its people. This isn't very clearly reflected in the recommendations, and it would be good to keep this idea more at the forefront of our deliberations. If there's a main point to if there's a main point for this evening, for me, it's this. One aspect of the commissioning framework that I think is missing and which I think we should include is a mechanism for recognising any unique or special talents that we have in the borough. We can rack our brains to think of what we want, but sometimes the ideas come when we see what we already have available in terms of talent, expertise and innovative ability. Nottingham became the UK's national ice skating centre, not because the local government put their heads together to see what they wanted in order to maximise financial savings, but because they recognised that in Torville and Deane they had very talented people in their midst and decided to promote and encourage their art. I'd love to see an element of this attitude in Basingstoke. You're not surprised to hear me point out that in Carla the Arts, we have one of the foremost proponents in this country of South Asian music and dance. I think that having identified an activity or organisation that is of exceptional quality that we want to encourage, discussion should take place to identify how that organisation can meet the desired outcomes of the COG. Then, rather than handing out a portion of funding with just a broad direction, the Council can work more closely to ensure accountability and clear benefit for the community. This takes more effort than just judging tenders, but could be so much more effective. And also this leads me to my last point. We have to see, and this has been mentioned before, that organisations like Carla, their funding from elsewhere is limited by a complete lack of funding from their own local government. Carla works all over Hampshire, recently, for instance, performing at an event given by the Mayor of Eastleigh. A few years ago, Carla secured some one-off funding from Basingstoke, which was excellent and opened doors for them, enabling them to broaden their work. However, since then, the borough door has slammed shut, and unfortunately funders from elsewhere look to see some financial recognition from the local authority in order to put their own money on the table.
Half a minute.
Even small-scale endorsement gives a huge leg up to organisations that need financial help in order to help and affect the wider community. Okay, just finally then, for a committee, I know it's helpful not to just have broad ideas but specific recommendations. So I'd therefore ask the committee to consider proposing the following: that some money is put aside to allocate to specialist talent recognised in the borough and which also has a desire and programme to serve the community. Funding can then be allocated to a relevant organisation in order to meet our own desired outcomes, and performance would be regularly assessed to ensure those desired outcomes are achieved. I'm not talking about event funding, which organisations like Carla and others can apply for, but funding that can help in admin, organisation, promotion, whatever is necessary to achieve the borough's desired outcomes.
Thank you. Well over your time. Thank you. But as I think you're the only one who's going to say that, I was slightly... It's Councillor Nigel Pearce, and then we're working along the front row.
Thank you, Chair. A number of things to bring to your attention this evening. The first, I just want to refer to the paper, section 11.6.2, where we see the capacity is incorrect. I think that's already been corrected. But what I would like to say about those comparisons is very simply this, that there is no comparison between those four those four venues, they all do different things. You can't compare what Yvonne Arnaud do in Guildford to the Festival Theatre in Chichester. The Festival Theatre in Chichester has a national audience. It isn't just a local audience. So, in considering the report, I think you should ignore, having said the figures are wrong anyway, I think you should ignore those comparisons because they're not correct. Certainly, whoever put the report together was not at the same COG as I was, because I don't remember most of what's in the report as being said at the COG. There are errors in numbers, which I can talk about outside the meeting. And it seems the report was not written with any specialist advice, which also seems quite foolish when this council has in the past spent significant amounts of money getting specialist expert advice, particularly in relation to the lunatic changing of the way the Haymarket was managed. And note that I was involved in that, and note that I'm not volunteering to take it on again, even though that is what this particular COG has suggested. One of the issues in terms of cuts in funding without a plan of at least 3 years is the Arts Council will withdraw their funding from the from the Anvil. Essentially, if you haven't got a 3-year plan, the Arts Council will not forward you, will not give you any money at all. And that's one of the most worrying things that Christine Bradwell has had to tell me in my phone call with her earlier this week. Comparisons with other towns, I've said already, completely lunatic. You don't mention Nottingham, which is a very, very good case in point, where a concert hall lives next door to a theatre. I thought it was quite interesting that the head of commissioning is managed by the director, who's a member of Destination Basingstoke board. And there's a clear conflict of interest in my head, anyway, when suggesting that Destination Basingstoke should take on some of this stuff. The attendance at the COG, I think, was unfixed, and not everybody came to every meeting, so although they were quite interesting, there wasn't a consistency, and that applies to any of them. Turning to the Central Studio, if you cut the funding for the Central Studio, then most of their professional programming will disappear. Although it's small scale, there's affordable music, comedy, and other small activities which will disappear if that funding goes as well. There are issues for Proteus as well. I'm sure Mary Swan will pick those up if she hasn't done already. And almost certainly if that funding is cut, a member of staff will disappear, and they've only got 2, so that makes life very, very difficult. I would seriously urge you to rethink this whole package. We are noted in the country for being a town that supports arts and cultural activities. We've got a great record in arts and cultural activities. Rather than undercutting funding, it's my opinion, and certainly the opinion of most of the arts organisations that I have contact with, that funding should be increased, not decreased. We're a beacon of cultural activity. We're the cultural centre of the Central South, and we need to build on that, not to erode it.
Thank you very much, and excellent timekeeping. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here this evening because of my commitment to arts and culture, and also I never want to disappoint Councillor Isaac when I follow him around every committee he attends. So if I sound cynical in my comments on this report, I intend to, and I must admit I'm shocked by 11th and perhaps even 13th hour changes to the report, pleased as I am for Proteus, but to deal with matters in that way I think is just totally unacceptable. I often oppose decisions made by this minority Tory administration because I reject their philosophy, but normally they have some evidence to support their decisions. In this case, there appears to be little or nothing in the way of evidence basing the decisions that are in front of us this evening. What we do have are preambles from the commissioning strategy team which say, for example, after considering the work of the COG, the commissioning strategy team found, that word is used, that etc., etc. Where does that very clear position come from? What's it based on? Presumably in COG terms, hundreds of coloured post-it notes often with a couple of words only on each one stemming from a particular COG meeting. Post-it notes, which are never seen again but are converted into the so-called outcomes we see littered throughout this report, all of which will have a fundamental impact on the arts and culture sector in Basingstoke. Like Councillor Harvey, I don't really criticise the strategy team in itself. I understand the pressure they must be under. Firstly, having to justify their own worth with their direct and indirect costs for this team, now 6, spiralling towards £500,000, but on top of that, having to respond to a political agenda intent on outsourcing public services, all towards a smaller public sector, often under the mantra of public bad and private good. The comments of the team, which include a statement that organisations do not currently plan on a financially sustaining basis, must be offensive to many in the sector who work so hard on negotiating their business plans year on year. In shorthand, saying you come with your begging bowl and we fill it. It is suggested that Basingstoke and Deane contribute significantly more than other local authorities in this sector. And as Councillor Pearce has just said, I say, so what? This should be to the credit of this well-off council. And in any case, the benefits that flow to the town are significant in themselves. And Basingstoke Live, as we've heard, is a prime example of this. In any case, benefits are not always measurable in money terms, but in Basingstoke Live terms, whatever analysis you make, it shows revenue income well over £1 million being brought into the town. The statement that the COG define the outcomes in this report is wrong and not based on evidence. There is little reference to in-house provision in this report, and I am advised that the events team were told that as is not an option, and in fact page 58 of pages 182 confirm this. That is a scandal. No organisation, public or private, with any integrity rules out the analysis of how something is provided currently, especially if it is done well, unless there is another agenda, and we've heard tonight how well this team operates. I'm particularly intrigued, but not surprised, by the sudden, or is it planned, intervention of Destination Basingstoke, with its offer to take over the running of more events. And again, as Councillor Pearce mentioned, examining the board of this organisation makes interesting reading.
Half a minute.
And I might suggest many have a conflicted position regarding this review of the arts and culture sector. Let me go on quickly. The scrutiny committee, of which I am a member, is undertaking a review of the first 12 months of commissioning and is undertaking its own survey of those who took part in COG 1. I urge participants here this evening and elsewhere to complete our survey so that we may establish how meaningful or not their contributions were. I also urge this committee to refer this report to the scrutiny committee so that together with that survey of participants, we can examine whether or not the proposed outcomes you have before you are based on fact or fiction. And in respect to what Joanna Rideout said, she did a critique which I think could well form the terms of reference for scrutiny, and I commend her for that. We would be happy to adopt some of those if we're given the opportunity to do this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Laura James. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. When this commissioning process started, we were told that it wasn't driven by financial needs and it was all about a new way of thinking. That didn't take long, did it? COG 1, and we are now into saving-driven targets. Taking, for example, the recommendations on events and festivals, the one that says that you should put big events out to competitive tender, putting our staff at risk of redundancy and cutting funding. The headline is all about how this will save the council 63% of its current spend. But if you read the small print, you will see that there are no guarantees over this saving at all. In fact, the small print actually says we haven't got any detailed costings at all. On page 138, footnote number 5, and I urge you to look at that, it says, the figures shown include an anticipated 63% budget reduction by 2019/20. This is based upon a mixture of benchmarking and evidence that with no detailed costings or market testing carried out, with an specific which are specific to the particular circumstances, objectives in Basingstoke. One other thing I wanted to point out is that there is a number of references made within the report about the costs of the current council events team. What it doesn't tell you is that this year the same events team are being charged £54,000 by the commissioning team for having their services examined by the commissioning team and in putting their jobs at risk of redundancy. Certain irony, I would say. The thread running throughout the paper is financial. The leader's comments, as a council leader, 2 nights ago on South Today, were that the council needed to make savings and there were choices, homelessness or arts. Can I remind the leader the homeless budget was underspent this year by £56,000 and the overall budget was £2 million underspent. You did not fund the homelessness, and you are not funding homelessness, and you are going to cut arts and culture. Can I also say that last week I was on a committee where we looked at additional funding for the rural economy. £250,000 we're going to look at how we can help farmers because they're struggling in the rural economy. And also this paper tonight looks at an additional £10,000 for the rural community and culture. So what is driving this paper? Who came up with the proposals? Because we have been told that organisations after organisations that the recommendations of the cabinet members listed in this paper do not relate to the COG that they sat through. The options designed in the paper by the commissioning team that have led to the recommendations have not been reported back to the COG. The COG has not been directly involved in drawing up the options of these recommendations. This is self-fulfilling prophecy. The agenda was set from an outset, and the COG is nothing more than is a talking shop to justify the actions of this administration. These budget cuts were always planned. The arts and cultures groups were always going to have to continually fight each other for a programme fund, and there won't be enough money to go round. I'm still trying to work out how Destination Basingstoke wound up being included in the COG, but after the email to members, I think we have a better idea of the reason that they were included in the first place. What these recommendations actually mean is that the process has failed. If anyone gets involved in the COG, then comments and input will be used to justify cuts, to justify council staff redundancy, and to outsource public services. This cabinet's real agenda, and as was said tonight, public is good, private is bad. And can I also say, my last comment, Chair, please, urge you just to listen to this.
It's
a very short one. I heard as well tonight about the head of commissioning and the cabinet member scurrying around to protest to say, we got it wrong, we'll offer you more money. Is that really what we're about? Is this what this is about? That is an absolute disgrace. And I hope that, we hope.
Right, which leaves us with one councillor, who I'm sure will give us an independent view of all this.
Hey.
He doesn't need to.
Yeah.
Right. It's Councillor Tilbury.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think Basingstoke Live, I think we all know what a success that was. I mean, growing up, having been a teenager in this area back in the 70s and 80s, Basingstoke was a cultural desert at that time. There was as much nightlife in Ovan as there was in Basingstoke, and that wasn't to say much. It was pretty grim, but it's been a transformation what's happened, so we really don't want to lose that, and we don't want to put it under threat. I didn't hear the leader's comments about the council need to make savings and comparing homelessness to the arts, and it's all the fault of the arts. Well, I think perhaps, I think there's another answer to that. Perhaps you could raise all the money we've got stashed away in our account. We conned the council tenants out of years ago when we sold their houses off. But that's another thing altogether. But what concerns me is looking at the paperwork on here. I too, like Mr. McLaughlin, I've got a feeling of deja vu reading this. It's the Anvil is now seen to be in the same position the Haymarket was in back in 2006. But what worries me is when I look at the figures, there's very few of them seem to add up. So some of them all seem to be completely different. The attendance at what's quite shocking is that the attendance at the Anvil and the Haymarket has plummeted. I mean, going back to, we were told back in 2006 that the attendance at the Haymarket was bad because it had fallen from 70,000 to about 68,000. It's now down to 37,000. Well, at the same time, the attendance at the Anvil in here is, in one place it's quoted as being 118,000 when it used to be 168. In another one on page 125, it's quoted as being at 87,000, which I don't know which one's correct. I think the 118 I would hope is correct. If the other one's it's that low, we're in real trouble. But so none of this report makes a lot of sense, and the conclusions make even less sense. If you look at page 125, it compares 6 different organisations there, and the one that comes out the most efficient is the one that is actually Ipswich Borough Council, which run all their services in-house. Which actually, probably, most people know that probably comes as no great surprise to me, but I'm not overly sure whether the figures are correct. I wonder perhaps it's because their actual revenue is considerably less, or perhaps they sell the tickets a lot cheaper and they get it from the economies of scale of selling them cheaper. But no, I've actually gone on their website, and surprisingly their actual their program is very much the same as the one at the Anvil at the moment. In fact, it's all the same. They just go round and round, these people, don't they? I mean, there's the same wrinkly rocker. John Mayer was on there, but the ticket prices are roughly the same. And in fact, in some cases, they're slightly more expensive in Ipswich. So none of the numbers make a lot of sense. If they've got a higher attendance and yet they're generating less money, they must be giving tickets away for something. So I'm very dubious about the figures on here. But what really concerns me is it does seem to be, we seem to be saying that if we look at this, clearly the Anvil isn't doing a good job. Well, is it? Well, I don't, without looking at the figures, I think we need to look at this. We need some proper scrutiny of this, because if the attendance has dropped at those 2 venues by 83,000, that's a massive change from 2006. And if we were saying that things were wrong in 2006, then they're a whole lot worse now, aren't they? The only other point I would make is, it seems to have been covered anyway. The funding to Proteus, we don't give them that much money, so to try and cut it by 5% seems pointless, and it just seems, unfortunately, like a lot of this, it seems to be ideologically driven, and it is just this thing that some people really just don't like the arts in the Conservative Party, and unfortunately, I can't believe the COG group got together and said, what we need is, we need all our budgets cut, but that's what seems to have come out of it. So either what they were saying wasn't understood, or something very odd was put in the coffee that day. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speakers of which I've been notified. Was there anyone who failed to get on the list who wanted to? Okay, thank you. There were a number of general comments about the COG process, but as Councillor Potter mentioned, the Scrutiny Committee is looking at the process, has already had a very robust evening in which I had the privilege of being substituted on a member of that committee, so I was fully involved in it, and it will be coming back to it. So I will try and rule out any discussion of the COG process. So it may get mentioned in passing while talking about the recommendations, but this is not an evening to discuss the process. It's not, and I do not want the portfolio holder telling me what a good process it is. We will leave the process to scrutiny. The second range of general comments which were made were number ones about budgets, whether we do need to, what the case is for reducing the budget, that sort of thing. And I'm going to give the portfolio holder about a minute to collect his thoughts and then invite him to give us any comments he wants to make on the generic, without mentioning any of the specifics, the generic, the background against this, the drivers for looking for greater efficiency. And then when we've done that, I am going to give us a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we will go through the recommendations, recommendation by recommendation, which means organisation by organisation, effectively. So that's the way I'm planning to do it. So we will give the portfolio holder a chance just to feedback on the generic comments about budgets, carefully avoiding any sales pitch for the COG, because I don't want to tempt the members to respond to it.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for all your contributions this evening, and there's a lot to take in, and But you, Chair, have asked me specifically to address this question of budgets and the sort of direction of approach on this. Firstly, I want to make it absolutely clear that the administration recognises the value of the arts and culture scene in Basingstoke, and we want to continue to support it and to make it and to enable it to grow. And on things like Basingstoke Live, I do get concerned that what we're being asked to say is that change isn't possible, that there's a sort of fear of change. And there's always the accusation that we're the big bad Tories and all we're about is making cuts. But this isn't the case here. What we want to do is and through this commissioning process and the new grants application process, make it a more dynamic approach than it's been to date. I want to see Basingstoke Live thrive, and the feedback that I got through the officers from the COGs was that that we should liberate Basingstoke Live. We should look at the possibility. There are some councillors who want things wrapped in cotton wool and there should be no change. All I'm saying here is that we should look at the possibility of bringing in experts, outside expertise, and also outside investment. It's a lot to ask our small officer team to deal with this. And I think, therefore, there's an exciting possibility here of building on the pump priming that this council has done with Basingstoke Live to take it forward and for it to grow and to add acts to it. The other important consideration in this is of course that as a council we can stay in control. We can continue to make sure that all of the good things, the values that that we've heard about today in relation to Basingstoke Live can be maintained. But, as I say, no decisions have been taken on that. I think another interesting feature of the commissioning process for arts and culture is, again, how there is a recognition from many of our arts and culture partners about the fact that we're all in the same boat these days and that there is less money around for arts and culture. They've all been very adult and responsible, more so than I may say so than certain people who always come to these occasions thinking, well, money's no object, and we can impress everybody by continuing to say that condemn those who want to maintain financial prudence. But arts and culture groups have said to us that yes, we get it. We understand that as a borough council you have a lot of competing demands on your finances, and those finances are under pressure, and yes, we recognise that we've got to play our part in that. And one of the thrusts of what we're seeking to do under these new arrangements is to say to our partners that if you work with us, we can give you greater certainty of funding, greater length of funding, so that you can plan, you can go to other grant organisations and say, yes, we've got the longer term backing of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, and you can therefore lever up additional grants, and it gives you a greater opportunity to look at how you as an organisation can go out and seek other sources of income. So I'm actually, I think that a lot of the arts and culture groups have recognised the potential gains, the prize that is available if we hold our nerve on this and don't get talked out of it by those who are always going to say, don't make changes, spend money,
Right, thank you. Right, members, we'll have a 5 minutes break, and when we come back, we'll be on page 58 of 182, looking at the recommendation about local events. And 5 minutes means 5 minutes. That's 5 minutes. If anyone could see any members of the committee around, could they encourage them back in this direction? Okay, members, please. Right, members, we will resume. We're on page 58. Just recommendation A4. We'll do A5 separately, and it's questions. We will then have debate. But are there any questions to the portfolio holder or the officers? And please, make questions. We will have plenty of time for speeches. Okay. Thank you, Anna. Councillor Cousins.
Questions first. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Recommendation A4 talks about a thematic portfolio of local events. Could you clarify which events you have in mind, please?
Chair, I can help with that one. In terms of what that portfolio of local events would look like, the portfolio holder has certainly indicated to me in conversations, and certainly it's something that I would recommend, that we involve members in what that portfolio would contain. It's not something that we had intended to go away and draw up a list, but work with members in terms of saying on a list of events that you would want to deliver, which ones are must have, which ones would be nice to have, and which ones maybe you don't want to see in a portfolio moving forwards.
Supplementary? Okay, fine. Any more questions on that particular recommendation? Okay, we will move to debate. I assume Councillor Cousins would like to go first, as it's very much his subject. So, if it's not catching you too cold,
No, I'll go. Yeah, I've got a feeling which local events are potentially in the pipeline, and we've spoken about one already this evening. It's called Basingstoke Live, and indeed. Well, actually, I need to hang fire a second because, Chair, you want to take our opinions and move the debate forward, recommendation by recommendation. Am I correct in that
correct?
understanding?
But I think Basingstoke Live is very definitely under the thematic portfolio of local events.
Yes. No. My point is that I would actually quite like for this report to be referred to scrutiny. Now, I don't know whether you want to encompass this as an all-in or whether you want to continue down the vein of recommendation by recommendation.
Thank you. What I said before the break, and I think I would still personally think to be the right course, scrutiny are looking at the process, and that's entirely right to do. These are recommendations for particular proposals relating to funding. The Council is about to enter its annual cycle of making funding decisions, And if we pass up the opportunity to make comments tonight, decisions are likely to be made without the benefit of our comments. So I think that would be unwise on our part. And I think that the various organisations who've taken the trouble to come tonight and speak to us deserve the benefit of our response. So I would strongly encourage the committee not to throw in the towel at this stage. Come back. Or was it you first?
Well, I was first, but...
No, Councillor Beerman, you were first and then Councillor.
Chair, I think because of much of what has been said was implying from the members of the public who spoke in particular, but also some fellow members, there was that the process was wrong, and therefore in reaching the conclusions, we're talking about the wrong conclusions. Now, I think there's certainly merit in going through the individual things just to get an idea of it, but I think it would be quite wrong to exclude the option of asking scrutiny to look at it, because, as I say, the conclusions have come out of the process, and the process has been new. People have been learning their way, and therefore it could be that one's got to learn something. And what this provides is an actual practical example of what can happen and what one might not wish to happen or might wish to improve on. So it's a very useful thing for scrutiny to be looking at rather than just talking theory. So you know, I'd like to think that at some stage we will take that consideration as a possible resolution and consider that for further debate.
Thank you. Remind me to come back to that. But although, to be frank, I'm sure scrutiny will look at this whether we refer it to them or not. I mean, if you're going to look at the process, they need to look at the example that they've got in front of them, which is this report. But as I'm saying, I think we also need to do our bit, and which is to comment on the recommendations as they affect the various organisations who've spoken tonight. Councillor Miller, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Scrutiny looks at process and what has gone before. This is looking forward and trying to allow us to express our views on what has been recommended. If you look at the wording and the recommendations, and we'll take A as an example, there's nothing concrete in there that's going to set this decision in stone. It's external providers can potentially invest. There's all the options are left in these the wording of these recommendations. It's not set in concrete. I've got a query about actually putting numbers in there, financial numbers in these recommendations, because that is going to depend on the dialogue that's going to take place, as mentioned in the recommendation of A4. Because it's going to depend on the dialogue to the various representations from the, what do we call them? The portfolio, the contents of the portfolio, which isn't identified per organisation yet anyway. So I think these kind of general recommendations could still be approved at this committee. This paper will not go back to scrutiny because it's outside the terms of reference of the scrutiny committee. The process is rightfully in the scrutiny committee looking at the process for COGS.
I suspect that if the scrutiny committee had sufficient reservations about any decision that came out of this, they'd call it in. So it'll get to scrutiny one way or another. And just to feedback on what you just said, Councillor, I mean, this recommendation is general and it's really a recommendation for work. Some of the later ones are very specific with numbers in, and we need to take each recommendation as it's in front of us, and the ones and if the ones with numbers in, you want at that point to say, actually, we don't think there should be numbers in this, that's we can take this recommendation by recommendation. But Councillor Cousins, do you want to come back? I mean, do you want to really press this point that we should just give up at this point tonight?
I can understand where you're coming from, Chair, in terms of we've got an opportunity to comment on the recommendations, but I think this is the first COG outcome that we have seen, and I know you don't want to hear about the process of it, but I personally have a query regarding the process of how the COG has come to its conclusions, which is why I'm suggesting we refer it to scrutiny. That's where I'm coming from on my angle.
Okay, as I say, it's already with scrutiny. Scrutiny have already had the debate. But I mean, I'm happy to record in the minutes, if we do proceed with the discussion, this is without any, it carries no inference that people approve or disapprove of the process. We are just, you know, we will treat this paper as if it had come purely as an officer paper, not as something that had come from a cog, and we'll look at the recommendation. I hope the officer feels I can do that. We're not getting terribly frowned at, so I don't, and you know, I'm happy to, you know, not in any sense imply that just because you agreed to discuss it, you approved of the process, because I'm trying to avoid people on all sides expressing their views on the process. Give you a chance to come back later, but we'll move on to this point at the moment while you're still thinking. And the first person I had who wanted to speak on this particular recommendation was Councillor Washbrook. I'm sorry.
It's a hybrid.
It's the two of you sitting next to each other confuses me.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask, obviously the A4, the thematic portfolio of local events, is commissioned through the process of competitive tender in order to enhance commerciality and sustainability, is only one of the 5 options that came out of the COG process. And I just wondered why we're not being asked to debate all 5 of these options. Why has one been singled out as the preferred option? Normally, as a committee, we would discuss all options and then obviously make a recommendation from this committee.
That's the recommendation, but I'm more than happy if you think one of the others would be better to tell me why you think that would be better.
Well, my point is that obviously that is not our recommendation from this committee. We've not had opportunity to discuss the other options that came out of the COG process. We're obviously being handed a recommendation and told that we're going with that. I mean, usually we would have an option to discuss the other options that came out first.
I mean, the paper does have the reasons for discounting the other options in italics there. They may be short, but we have been given them, and we can ask questions about those reasons if we want to. And I mean, I guess we have an option as a committee just to say we couldn't reach a view on this one if that's, you know, what happens on that particular one. But does anyone actually have any comments they want to make on what A4 itself is? And again, that's not ruling out coming back to your point. Councillor Miller.
A bit of a question from me is an education. Were not all the groups and the council represented on this COG?
Perhaps an officer can answer that one for us, please. I assume you mean political groups?
Yes,
yes.
Yeah, members.
It's members.
All members had the opportunity to take part in every session of the questioning outcome group. We can circulate afterwards which members attended which sessions, if that would be useful.
Okay. Councillor Bierman.
Chair, just in response to that last one, I can certainly confirm that independents were invited. The problem was that the gatherings were at times when it was difficult to attend because of having day jobs, and so that does exclude people who are not in the leisured classes. As regards the options here, I think that the problem with A4 is that it's sort of very exclusive. It is one solution and doesn't allow for other solutions. It suggests basically we're going to do this on a rather commercial basis, and whilst nobody is arguing against looking at the purse strings and making sure that they're not too loose, equally it shouldn't be just a question of competitive tenders. There will be times when that just isn't appropriate. I mean, for instance, we had Carla the Arts. How can one get in other Odessi performers of a unique nature and say, right, well, you are going to be put out to tender, and who will we get, because you won't get anybody else. And I think Councillor Taylor made a wonderful presentation in making the point that if we've got something special and almost exclusive, we should be building on that and taking advantage of that. And I don't see how that would fit into A4.
No, I think it's not intended to fit into A4, and we'll come back to Carla later in the evening. Can I just perhaps invite either one of the officers or the portfolio holder just to fill us in a bit more on what actually hangs on what we say about A4 tonight? And let me expand that before I give you a chance to think. It is clearly an option because it's been put on the table. Yet we also have a very firm commitment that Basingstoke Live, Basingstoke Festival, and I assume the fireworks will all go ahead in 2015 on the present basis with the present funding. I think that's what I picked up, but tell me if that's wrong. So what are we saying that we are now, if this recommendation is committing that there will definitely be a commissioning process through a competitive tender for 2016? Or is it saying we will do more work and some soft market testing to see whether it's worth having a competitive process? Because I'm not sure it's clear which.
Can I help there? Yes, there is funding in place for Basingstoke Live and Basingstoke Festival for next year. So let me reiterate that point. The second point, the second part of your question is that what I'm recommending here to Cabinet is that we would look at whether it's viable, whether there is a market for for events being run by third parties, and we would soft market test that and then make a decision whether that is the right way to proceed.
And to pick up one of the points from one of the public speakers, I mean, probably one of the councillors, are we ruling out putting soft market testing an internal option? Is that still an option that could be considered within that?
I think that has to be looked at in the context of the results of what we get from the soft market testing.
So, well, I'm just about to ask that question. So, I take it that means that if the soft market testing suggested that we weren't going to get more for less by going outside, we would certainly come back to the option of continuing with the present arrangements, whatever, and looking at the appropriate level of funding.
My recommendation is that I think that that in order to develop and expand the offer that things like Basingstoke Live presents, we should be looking at bringing in outside expertise and outside resources. I'm clear on that. But if it becomes apparent that there isn't that is not a viable option, or it can only be achieved in ways that we as a council are not happy with, then yes, we would look again at either as is or looking at the internal trading account.
Councillor Cousins, are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And in light of what the portfolio holders just said, it leads me to say that I don't want A4 as our recommendation, but I would like A1 as our recommendation, which is as is. Now, just page 53 of 182, and I know this is partly questions, but I'm hoping that the officers will help us out with this. 3.1 says 212 ideas were captured of how the council could invest differently in the future. I want to know how many of those 212 ideas suggested that outsourcing events was a viable option.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me we're supposed to be on questions still. I sort of morphed into discussion.
Chair, I can help with that. So the 212 ideas were across all the people that attended the COG. So obviously there was a lot of repetition, and many were repeated or came under the same theme or same scope. Specifically in relation to events, there were post-it notes that posed a question or made a statement. Is the council the best placed to deliver events? Should events be delivered in-house? Those sorts of questions were put on those post-it notes, and that's what the team have taken away from that session.
Councillor Cousin.
Those are questions. I'm sorry to be a bit pedantic, but my question was how many of the 212 suggested that? I appreciate you can't necessarily give me an exact figure, but how many of the 212 specifically said?
I'm sorry, Councillor, if I could give you an indication and say it was a dozen, it was 5, it was 20, I would do, but we don't have that information.
Questions? Yes, Councillor Bound.
Well, it's a point really. I mean, don't
worry, go for points.
For all Councillor Isaac's sort of talk about soft market testing, whatever that is, I'm sorry, I'm not knowledgeable in that way. It doesn't seem to me that A4 has that in its wording, so I can't go along with A4 because that's not what it's saying.
No, fine. I'm not hugely in disagreement with you. Soft market testing, I mean, maybe creative there, means not that you do a formal tender exercise where people bid and make formal bids, to do a certain thing for a certain price. You go around and ask people, soft market testing, what they could deliver and what they would recommend, and then when you know what people might offer, you actually do a tendering exercise if you think it's worth doing a tendering exercise. But the portfolio holder, I think, is probably going to put that in a rather clearer way than I've just.
I accept what Councillor Bound is saying, and I think that we can alter the wording to make reference to soft market testing.
I certainly would be. I see a hand from the audience. I'm a bit reluctant to start letting. I mean, I will let people who represent specific organisations. I know. I mean, the organisations we're discussing come forward, but I don't want to go down that road too early in the evening. Anyway. Yes, I mean, I personally feel that that is what is being said, that this is not a firm decision that we will outsource for 2016. It's a recommendation to explore what the options would be, and I think you already said that if there isn't a viable option, then we'll come back. What I would like, and I'll take your points in a minute, and I would certainly want, and we'll take the councillors and then the portfolio can come back, some sort of statement that we could put in as to when assurance that this will come back to this committee after the soft market testing, so that we can have we can give our views on whether we think the outcome of that is promising in terms of going ahead with a commissioning approach. I think it was Councillor Cousins first. Okay, Councillor Washbourne.
Thank you. I've still got quite big concerns in regard to A4. Obviously, I mean, it all seems to be dependent on how you actually read that recommendation. Now, to me, I'm sitting here reading it, and it's saying to me that it's recommended that the events go out to commissioning, and this is what's going to be going to the Cabinet. And if the Cabinet decides that that's what's going to happen, then it goes out to commissioning. There's nothing I can read in here that says anything any different. So I'd have grave concerns in actually endorsing that recommendation.
Now, I think we're exploring that we make it, what we would be supporting is further work, which I think was what with the soft market testing of this idea, that it may or may not then go ahead. And what I'm after is some assurance we get another say before the final decision on whether it goes ahead. But Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. We're being asked to approve the recommendations without providing an indication of what these decisions will bring other than the budget cut that we get for not funding it. So I want to ask, why have we not been indicated as to the impact upon these events should we go out to commercial tender? What's the future for those events should a successful tender happen?
Can we?
We've got grant funding in place for the next year. What you're trying to do is just freeze everything, and I know that's your approach to things. You don't want change, You're not even prepared to look at change. What I'm saying here is that we will undertake a soft market testing exercise of a portfolio of local events, and if an alternative viable market exists, it's then commissioned through the process of competitive tender. But it's if there is a viable market out there that exists for this.
I'll come back to you. I mean, for those who haven't got all the report in their head, I mean, I was struck by the observation that specialist outside companies may, and I emphasize may, be able to draw in more sponsorship than an internal team could, may be able to do other things that an internal team by definition can't do. And as I say, I'm happy to continue the exploration. I'm not, I mean, but I'm also happy to say I don't think we have enough information to give a green light to saying commissioning must be the right answer to this. We need to know what comes out of the soft market testing first. But Councillor Cousin.
Thank you, Chair. The reason I ask is because I was going to follow up with a portfolio holder asking if he had had access to the paperwork that were made available to the Basingstoke Live map of 2012-13.
That's an interesting question.
If I did, I can't remember.
I can help you a little bit, Councillor Isaac, because that paperwork did actually look at, what would happen if we ticketed the event. It also looked at what happened if we did go out to competitive tender, and the big bullet point across the top was there is no desire from anyone external to do this. There wasn't a company or a body that was desperately pushing forward or seeking to overtake Basingstoke Live as it was. Now, that's one point to consider. The other thing as well is if you're going to go down this avenue of commissioning, would you agree that the unique selling points of events like Basingstoke Live would change?
Well, I'm so relieved. We have it. The answer there was all contained in the 2012 report. I've not said anything about a ticketed event. You said something about a ticketed event. But I think I'm just struck by the unwillingness to even look at this possibility. And there are opportunities for sponsorship, for merchandising. What I'm about here is looking at how we can develop Basingstoke Live, as we're obviously talking about Basingstoke Live big time at the moment. So I don't accept that we have to sort of freeze this event. We should be looking at bringing in other partners, other experts who can build on what we've done to date, but preserving all the good values of Basingstoke Live. Let's get the best of both worlds. That's the sort of conservative approach to things. And you talk about the USPs. Yes, there are USPs. And we would, there's an opportunity here to make sure that those are preserved. But also, let's not close our eyes to the possibilities that there might be new things we could bring into this. New opportunities for local talent to showcase itself.
Okay, can I encourage both of you to try and not let it get too party political and too much criticising each other's approach to life, the universe, and everything. And I've had a couple of hands waving for the audience now, so I'll see whether we can accommodate that. But we're technically supposed to end in 20 minutes, which we're not going to achieve. But we oughtn't to be aiming to be here till midnight. I just wanted to say on that, and I think that's very helpful evidence from Councillor Cousins, but the difference here is it is talking about a thematic portfolio of local events, and it is possible, no more than that, you would get a different answer if you went out and said, are you interested in doing a range of events, which includes Basingstoke Live, Basingstoke Festival, and other things you might want to propose, as opposed to just Basingstoke Live. So I just throw that out as a possibility. I think it was Councillor Bierman next.
Chair, I just sort of feel we're rather going round in circles without wishing to intrude on anybody else's heartfelt thoughts. Why can't we just introduce, going back to what I said and what Councillor Bound said earlier, the concept of soft market testing as part of A4, and then I think we've achieved, what most people want. I don't think anybody's saying we shouldn't do any competitive tendering. I feel we should just include the option that might not end up as competitive tendering, and I thought, in fact, the portfolio holder sort of nodded positively to that earlier, and then we can move on.
Yeah, I will let the other two speak. Did the portfolio holder, because that's what I was sort of suggesting as.
I think I've said that.
Good. Fine. It's Councillor Westbrook. I get.
Thanks, Chair. Reverse side of tickets, really. I mean, I suppose you're saying basically it's possibly could stay free entry. I mean, if Basingstoke Live went out to tender, it would need to yield an income stream. I'd imagine for the stay free entry, its sponsors would need guaranteed numbers attending, which would probably mean bigger headlining acts, and then it could easily lose its identity as a showcase for local talent, even though it might be a good thing to enlarge it. You can probably lose something in doing that, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, I accept there are always risks if you make changes, and that's why we need to look at these things very carefully. But I think the other point I'd like to make is that I don't envisage that this council would sort of one day just cease to fund the Basingstoke Live. I see this as being a process whereby what we are contributing would reduce over time, because we are going to need to be there, I'm sure, alongside partners. So I hope that gives you some sort of clarity about my views on that.
Can I just ask, because I mean the point about showcasing local talent was, I think, made by at least one of the visiting speakers. For those of you who are more familiar with the data, what proportion of the acts would be described as local talent?
I believe it's around 80%, but I'm going to quickly refer to Mr. Midgley. Yes, it looks like it is 80% and the upper ends of 80%. 80% minimum, I'm being told. Thank you.
Right, and Officer.
Chair, I might be able to add something here, just in terms of our general procurement processes and around the soft market testing. People have heard of social values coming out of Public Services Act. We commit in the commissioning framework, as we do with any of our procurement across the board, in terms of a test on impact on local economy. So that's both the volunteer hours, the footfall, what it brings to our local economy, and that is something that's a commitment in the commissioning framework as well as in our general procurement processes.
But I think it would be good for us as a committee, if others agree, to we would like the future work to particularly take into account the value of Basingstoke Live as a showcase for local talent. I mean, that's not ruling anything in or out, but I think it's an important feature of it that we want on the table, that we regard that as an important thing, to look at safeguarding that as the work goes forward. I think it was Councillor Miller and then Councillor Tate.
Without complicating what A4 it states at the moment, I fully support let's get soft market testing as a concept in there, but I think I'd like to see it a little bit wider, and the portfolio holder can correct me, but his comment that it would maybe a gradual reduction in the budget that the council dedicates to certain events, and I'm keeping everything on the table, all the events, the activities, the specialist groups, that when you look at commissioning, I think we shouldn't say it's going to go out to tender. Please, the organization might go out to tender, and they are responsible then for creating their own revenue stream, but Basingstoke essentially controls the event in the case of the festival and Basingstoke Live. We still contribute money from the budget, but a reduced amount with your commission, whatever is commissioned, and it's partial. This is what we're talking about, partners. Portfolio holders just mentioned it. This is the way it works outside in the big wide world. Soft market testing is very common. It's how you get an idea of how to form your budgets. It's the only way that companies outside can look for work. They know what the competitiveness is in these particular specialist activities. And believe you me, organizing events is very specialized in the commercial world, because there are people that have gone to university and got degrees in it. You know, it's that specialized. The big event, you talk to the big event boys. Who organizes the Reading Festival? It isn't Reading. Somebody comes in from outside and does it. They're given a venue. That's probably the council's contribution to it. So this is, don't take it, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that this is commissioning the whole enterprise. It may be, and this has to be tested on each individual event, activity, group. They all have to have a little bit more work involved to see what portion of it might be able to be sent out to tender. It could be a small portion. It could be, if it's viable. I think that's another word we need to have in here. Is it viable as far as we are concerned, because we control it? That's what I'd like to see in here as a sort of concept. If it's proved it's not viable, that it doesn't bring what the organizations want to see, that the people of Basingstoke don't want, then we modify what proportion is sent out to commissioning. You can't put all that in A4, but I think that's what I'm trying to get as a flavor of all this. It's the way the world works out there, and we can't stand back and just let it go by.
And I see another hand from the audience, and I think I'm probably not going to be able to invite public speakers back again. I'll take Councillor Tate and Councillor Taylor, and then we'll try and draw some of this together.
Thank you, Chair. I firmly believe that the success of local events of any event is it maintains a dynamic, and that the dynamic around it is what creates the vigor, which means it expands and grows. And that frankly, leaving things as they are in any form of world doesn't work, they just die. So I think change is in any way inevitable, but what I think we're saying here is how to manage that change, how to make it responsive to the people who go to the event, the people who support it, and those people who don't. You know, there are people who don't support events too, but they need also to be taken into account to see that there is a life to this which is not just being imposed by some structure which is not moving and not responding to what's going on in the real world, in the market. And maybe as part of that, what I was trying to offer with this is that if this is a recommendation along the lines of it's a thematic portfolio of local events commissioned and through the process of soft market testing in order to determine their commerciality and sustainability, does that form of words which says, actually, we can do something different, we can make something happen, and it's not just going to sit as it is.
I'll come back to the form of words in a minute when Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. The first point is to Councillor Miller. I'm sorry. Sorry, first is to Councillor Miller. Reading Festival is not free. Yeah, so you can't use them both as the same thing. My other part is going to a little tangent. Is that a couple of weeks ago on the local news was the football club, I think the chief executive of the football club mentioned that Basingstoke Live will be going into the football club. Now, I don't know what the attendance will be allowed to do that. So we're going from 33,000 that attended this year to going into a 2-day event using the football ground. If it only holds 5,000 people, you're only going to get 10,000 people in there. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I will ask for a comment on the football because I hadn't heard that and I hadn't read that in here. And, is that actually a proposal?
No, I've never heard it. And it seems so far-fetched to me. I just don't understand that. I think maybe some of the parking could be used for Basingstoke Live, but the idea we're way off from a stadium being constructed. So I don't know where it comes from, actually.
Can I just say, having told several
just
of
for
the
your
public,
benefit,
I couldn't.
Just for your benefit, Chair, I've had a letter through my door in Ruskin Close over in Blackdown from the football club telling me that they can put on Basingstoke Live in the stadium.
Okay,
And that's the reason for
Thank you. No, thank you. Right. Well, let me say that's not endorsed. We've had with them before. It's not come from here, and it's not been agreed by here, and it's not, I gather, being considered here. Can I say, just come back, and I do feel that, you know, we need to be a bit careful. We're talking about comparisons with Reading and things like that, because yeah, now just, I'm agreeing with you. Don't because what we were saying earlier was one of the distinctives about this. It's a showcase for local talent, whereas Reading and Carfest and people are not showcases for local talent. They're a different sort of animal. And what I think we're working our way towards was saying we like this sort of animal because this is ours, and we want, if this further work is done, we want something that recognises the advantages of Basingstoke Live as a showcase for local talent. So what I was going to suggest as a start, and if officers wouldn't mind writing, just you know, so that someone's got it down, is that what we think the recommendation should be is that we move forward with soft market testing of the option of commissioning a thematic portfolio of local events through a process of competitive tender, which would enhance commerciality and sustainability, and that the work should pay particular attention to the benefits of Basingstoke Live as a showcase for local talent. Now, Councillor Cousins shook his head the most violently, so he gets first go to come back on that.
Thank you, Chair. The reason why I'm so against A4 is because it puts the potential process of commissioning certain events into the pipeline, and unfortunately, commissioning is something I'm not very interested in. I don't know how I can make it any more sort of simplistic than that. I'm not in favour of commissioning. I call it privatisation. Its new name is commissioning. I don't want to see events like Basingstoke Live potentially go down that avenue. That's why whatever guise you put A4 in, if it's got the commissioning element in it, I won't be supporting it.
Fine, that's clear. So whether you use the word commissioning or not, you're opposed to any suggestion that it should be run from the private sector, whether voluntary or profit making. Okay, yeah, I'm just being clear what. Well, it was not outside. That was what was being said. That's why I was trying to. That's what I'm trying to clear. Whether we're saying it has to be in house, or merely that it's an averse to people who do things on a business like.
My preference is as per A1, which is in-house in conjunction with the local community and the local Basingstoke Live Forum.
Right, I'm trying to work out whether there's anything more we can usefully say before we try and draw this together. Did anyone on the committee burning to say something?
Yes, I'm afraid I have.
Yes.
You might not welcome this because it's opening up a bit of a new front, but I think that somebody at some stage needs to provide a definition, as I don't think it's in the dictionary, of commerciality. I know what I could imagine under it, but my imagination of that might not be exactly the same as somebody else's.
And the other thing I forgot to say in my attempt to join a consensus was that I would want to see an assurance that after the soft market testing there would be a report back to this committee, so we had a chance to comment further on whatever recommendation was being made going forward from that. Is that acceptable?
Chair, the only thing we probably wouldn't be able to do is identify the organisations that had submitted that information in soft market testing, because confidentiality, that would probably prevent us from doing that, or people won't come to the table with soft market testing if it was something that was then discussed in public. But certainly all of the information that we obtain, the questions that we've asked and the indications that we get back, we can bring back to committee.
Okay, and the likely financial.
You don't get bottom line finances in soft market testing. That's the one thing you can't do, because that's jumping the gun before going through a tender process, but you can ask the questions. And if I just give an example to members, if this helps, in terms of when we went to soft market testing on the centre shuttle bus, we asked questions such as, does painting it pink make a difference to the price? Does an older bus make a difference to the price? The frequency. We ask questions like that, and that gives you an indication of then what you would put into a tender specification.
Thank you very much. I know we're not going to get unanimity on this. Councillor Bierman, at one stage, you indicated that you were willing to go with the option of doing some soft market testing and then coming back to us without, I'm sure, committing yourself to the view that you'd want it to be successful, but at least you were open to it being explored. Is that still the position?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't want to exclude opportunities. It's been said it might introduce new opportunities and ideas. I don't want to preclude that, though my heart wouldn't be wholeheartedly with it. I think it would be irresponsible, and I think probably doesn't stand a chance, given the views of the administration, to be excluded. So I wouldn't go down fighting against that idea.
I think that is probably therefore likely to be a majority view. We're discouraged from taking votes, and but I'm happy to. I mean, if you want to have your views registered by name as disagreeing, I think, is that permissible in the minutes these days? Someone could tell me. Is she listening? If particular councillors wish to have it recorded they disagreed with the majority view, can that be put in the minutes? Yes, that can be put in the minutes. I've had so many people ahead of you. That's all right. We'll. Right. So I think the majority were okay with the way I expressed it, that the recommendation should be to proceed with the market testing with a view to considering the possibility of commissioning well, we'll leave the wording because it's not my favourite word either, but a thematic portfolio, and with the caveat that it should pay particular attention to the value of Basingstoke Live as a showcase for local talent, and that the outcome of the soft market testing should be reported back to this committee. And we recognise the limitations. I don't think that needs to be put in the resolution. Now, is that I think is the majority view? Does anyone wish to have an alternative view recorded as a minority view? Yes.
Yeah, Councillor Westbrook, I disagree with A4, and I'm in agreement with Councillor Cousins on A1. As is ain't broke, don't.
Fine. And is that all five? Yes. Okay. So if officers can make sure that those five councillors' names are recorded in the minutes as being against even the varied A4 and in favour of A1, and you can tell the journalist at the end who you are, because she's trying to see who it is. A5, which is specifically about destination Basingstoke. I think we'd like it's a lot has been said about destination Basingstoke. We did have members of the committee had an email, which I gather had wider, assume it's the same email that's had wider circulation. What can we say about this, please? What is actually proposed for destination Basingstoke? I take it that their comment, while you're thinking about that, their comment in their email that they would welcome the opportunity to bid to run a thematic portfolio events is purely, I mean, that's completely out of the blue from them. That's not something that, they're just, any organisation could bid if we eventually went down that process. It was more the second bit. What are we actually proposing in relation to their current funding that I was interested in?
The comment about the reviewing of destination Basingstoke is really putting a marker down. Members that have seen the email can see that they do have a portfolio of events, and therefore if we were looking at doing something with our pot of money for events, would we look to both grant fund destination Basingstoke in moving forward with events, and have a separate portfolio of events that might be commissioned post soft market testing and everything that's already been said, Chair. So it was really just putting the marker down that it's something that we would have to review, and it goes along everything else in terms of the events.
If I've read the papers correctly, the existing grant to Destination Basingstoke runs through to March 2015. So if there isn't a review of the grant, they don't get any more money. So the proposal that needs to be looked at as part of the ongoing grants review, which paper I hope we'll still get to tonight, seems to me, I mean, the alternative of not considering giving them a grant after 2015 seems to be worse from their point of view. So I wasn't quite sure what the problem was.
They are welcome to apply for programme funding, and that would be for each of the individual programmes they might run, so half marathon or the business awards, etc.
Sorry, but given that the current funding arrangement is over 20,000, they would surely be entitled to apply for a programme grant, or a strategic grant.
So there's 4 criteria with the strategic grant, and I'm not sure, we haven't done an assessment against every organisation, against every criteria. I would probably think unlikely to be strategic and more pointed towards the programme pot.
Give other people a clue. Just to clarify, because I thought the main point of Destination Basingstoke was to promote the borough and to run a website and do all sorts of things like not events. I didn't think events was their main raison d'etre. So presumably would they have to apply for funding for the sort of general publicity thing as a programme item? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Chair, it would be. It would be an unusual programme to apply for in terms of what you'd envisage that programme pot for, but yes, there wouldn't be an exclusion to doing that.
Okay, anyone want to disagree? I mean, it seems to me there's got to, you know, if the money runs out in March, they need to apply again, and if we go down with a new system of doing grants, they need to fit in with it. But if anybody takes a different view, please say. Okay, so I think that's okay. We'll move on. Now we're into theatres. And the first recommendation is B3 on page 61 of 182, which is to continue funding Anvil Arts for each of the 2 venues separately until March 2017, but decreasing by 5% per year. And then you really need to look at B4, which says, during that period, the council will undertake soft market testing during this period to determine the viability of competitive tendering these 2 venues separately beyond March 2017. And then you go back to B3, which is if you don't do this competitive tendering, you continue the grant beyond 2017, but reduce it by 7% per annum. Now, I could just clarify, because I think this is what I've read, and just tell me right, that the Anvil have either proposed or at least agreed the 5% for 2 years. Have they agreed the 7% as well? What's the...
No, I think the position is they've offered the 5%. I do apologise. They've offered 5% reductions, and I think that we are proposing that beyond 2017 it would be the reduction would be increased to 7%. But they are offering ongoing year-on-year reductions.
So I think, and I'll let Ken speak. I mean, I think we've got about 3 issues here. One, what we feel about the 5% reduction for 2 years. I mean, I'm sure that it's a big ship. If you were going to change direction, you'd need at least 2 years to sort it out. What we think about market testing, and particularly what we think about the option of competitively tendering the 2 venues separately, which would be an interesting reversal of history, but possibly that one whose time has come. And then what we think about the position beyond 2017 if we stayed with Anvil Arts. So those seem to be the main issues, but I'll do Councillor Beam first and then Councillor...
I want to go very slightly off piece, Chair, if I may, because we're starting to talk about these percentages, and I think earlier on we said we really didn't want to get too deeply into the percentages, but there's a wider issue, I think, that we don't seem to address anywhere. If we do no decreases in funding, unless somebody like Anvil come along and volunteer it, that's fine. But on other bases, if we don't decrease the funding and left at the same level, that in effect is decreasing it because of inflation. But more so, if one looks at what each resident is doing to support the arts, again, if we don't change it, each year residents are contributing less to the arts percentage-wise because there are more residents as we grow, and we've been growing quite massively, and we're going to be growing even more. So in effect, even if we left it exactly as it is for each organisation, I'm not saying that's the answer, but I think it should be borne in mind, we are in effect contributing less each year.
Councillor Mrs. Tucker.
It's a question, Mr. Chairman. The council continue funding Anvil Arts for each of the two venues separately. Is that what they've agreed, the separately, or I don't know?
You could respond to both those points, please.
I will try, yes. Councillor Beerman's point, yes, it's right. By virtue of not increasing the grants, by dint of inflation, it would of course be it would reduce. But what one has to bear in mind that on a larger scale, that's exactly what's happening to us as a borough council. We're getting less and less grants coming through from central government, and because of the low interest rates in the money markets, we're getting less return on the money we are investing. So we're between a rock and a hard place. And what's encouraging here is that the chairman of the Anvil, to his great credit, has come forward and on the basis of longevity of funding has offered us this reduction, which I think is admirable. On the point that Councillor Tucker has asked, no, I don't think that this is not something that's been volunteered by the Anvil Arts, but it's something that's emerged through the commissioning process, really, and the ideas that we've had from those who attended the COGs, that they suggested it would be a good idea to at least look at the possibility of separating it. It may be that to come back to this question of viability, that it doesn't work, but I think it's incumbent upon us as a public body putting forward sort of £1.4 million of residents' money into Anvil Arts to at least ask the question, to do some soft market testing to see whether there is a possibility. Because what became apparent is that there are certain groups who think, yes, that they could do better with the Haymarket. They could open it longer hours during the day. So there are ideas. So let's not shut our eyes to the possibilities of change and improvement and new things happening. I am fully aware. I've met the Anvil board, and I know how committed they are to what they're doing, and they have an incredibly impressive track record. And I don't want to in any way take away from that. But again, as a responsible administration, looking after people, the residents' money, we have a duty to occasionally, once every so often, test these things. But I think ultimately what we want to get to is a settled position where we've got a vibrant Anvil Theatre and Haymarket that have confidence that they're getting funding for a period of time up to 5 years, rather than the way they've been operating for some time now, which is where they've been a cap in hand year in, year out. I want to end that process.
Can I ask members of the committee, does the objection to competitive tendering extend to this as well? I mean, is it an objection in principle that you need to record again?
Yes.
Okay. Even though it's currently run by an outside organisation? Competitive tendering would only be about considering a different outside organisation. I'll give you a moment to think about that, and then anyone else want to speak? Yes, Councillor Brown.
As far as I was concerned, it's already been outside tendered anyhow, so I wouldn't have the objection there.
I mean, speaking personally, I think with a lot of these things, what we ought to be aiming for is a large measure of stability. So people, 5-year funding and things, but not you've got the money for life, so that every so often you shake things up a bit and see whether things could be done better or differently. Because I think if you leave things just going on the same year after year after year, you don't obtain benefits that you could obtain. And I think that the funding for the anvil has seemed to sort of fairly constant in the council's budget for all the time I've been a councillor. You know, oh, it's the anvil, they must have their money. So the fact that they're willing to consider doing things differently, running it for less, and we're going to look at whether there are other people equally external who could run it differently and perhaps produce a better service or whatever. I think, you know, probably that's an idea that it's, personally, I think its time has come. I mean, it's a good time to look at it, but you wouldn't want to be doing it every year, that's for sure.
I'm just suggesting, may I suggest, Chair, that we accept the recommendation and move on?
I think there's I think that's the general feeling. We're happy to accept. No, well, sorry, I think the majority are happy to accept the recommendation. Is there minorities who wish, even allowing for the fact that the anvil is already an external body, wish to object to, in principle, to competitive tendering? That's okay. Okay, I won't. You know,
just briefly, Chair, I think the dilemma we've got is that we do help the anvil quite a bit, and there's a partnership there. I think that's the thing.
Yes,
that's the problem we're having.
And I think it's welcome that they've proposed the 5%. Yes, and I think that's right. And they may well come out, if you do a competitive tender, they may be the best body. So you know. Okay, I think that's probably enough for that. Now we're on to C3 on 62 of 182. The council funds the Hampshire Cultural Trust in 2015-16 only from Milestones, Basinghouse and the Willis Museum, and after reviewing the work of the Hampshire Cultural Trust during next financial year, the council may commit to further funding, which could reduce by a further 2% per annum in years 2 and 3, followed by further 10% in year 4 and 2% in year 5. Did someone like to talk us through? Those are very precise numbers. Is there anything more you can say than what's in the paper on the logic for those numbers?
Yes, so yeah, we understand that obviously the 2%, 2%, 2%, 10%, and then 2% could be seen slightly bizarrely from an external position. What we wanted to do was we wanted to really make sure that we were aligning ourselves with how the cultural stuff was establishing itself with its parent organisations, so which are Hampshire County Council and Winchester City Council. So although they are slightly increasing their initial subsidy to the cultural trust, what they're actually doing over a period of 5 years is reducing that amount to take into account their increase in commerciality in specific areas, and they're reducing that amount by the 2%, 2%, 2%, 10%, 2%. So we thought it fair to align ourselves with that.
I've just been reminded that we're past 9:30 when we should have stopped. We continue, I think, if we're content as a majority continue, and we ought to set ourselves a new target time. I would really want to finish this and the arts paper, and I think the grants paper, and being realistic, I would suggest that we very, very, very reluctantly agree to continue to 10:30. But you will be aware, members of the committee, because I already sent you an email yesterday, that I'm proposing some changes to our future work programme, which would leave only 2 items on the next meeting, so we could recover some of the time overspent this meeting by going home early at the next one. On that basis, are we content to definitely aim to finish by 10:30 and earlier if possible? Is that okay? Yeah, okay, fine, thank you. Any more questions or comments on C3, please? Councillor Cousin.
Thank you, Chair. Milestones, Basinghouse and Willis Museum are museums. Correct me if I'm wrong, they are county functions. So my question is, why are we continuing to prop up a county function, bearing in mind they cut our bus fund?
That's a good question, Councillor Cousins. And that's why we're recommending here that we, I wouldn't want to draw connections between the two, of course, but that's why we do need to look at the, that's why we're recommending that that the funding is in place for 1 year. so that we can get to know the Hampshire Cultural Trust better and be certain that it's the right vehicle for us to be signing up to, and also making a decision of how much money we might want to grant to this body in the future.
Right. I think that indicates we may want to emphasise the word may if we do that. But I mean, I think the other point about them, they are museums, but they're also tourist attractions, and what particularly milestones. So what is the case for supporting them, particularly as tourist attractions, as opposed to museums?
Yeah, I think to give a balanced view on this, the museums are an integral part of Basingstoke, and putting aside any sort of issues with Hampshire County Council, they are important to the borough. They contribute immensely to the life of the town and the borough. Generally, they bring in outside visitors who spend money. So I don't want to give any impression that the administration is not foursquare behind the museum's service in the town, and I look forward to finding a good future arrangement with HCT.
Councillor Bierman, and then Councillor Mrs. Secretary.
Chair, I think we truly are on the horns of a dilemma with this one, and I would, on this occasion, wholeheartedly support what the portfolio holder is saying, on the basis that if we do anything else, we're potentially withdrawing funds at pretty short notice, and a year should give us the opportunity to look at the opportunities. And whoever it is, and particularly somebody or some bodies, as they are, that are for so many reasons good for the borough, I don't think we should be upsetting their planning too drastically. So I would support what's being offered here.
Okay, given the need, sorry, Councillor Mrs.
I just wanted to remind people the connections of milestones with Basingstoke and Dean when it was started, and we are very much a part of it and should remain part of it.
Can I suggest, because we do need, I particularly want to make sure we have time for Proteus, that we can accept this whilst noting that there will be review in 2015-16, and so there is no commitment at this stage to funding beyond the Cultural Trust beyond 2015-16. That will depend on the outcome of the work next year. We've understood that correctly. So we'd like it noted that we're supporting this on the basis that further work will be done, and presumably a further decision will be taken then. Okay, over the page, I'm surprised there's nobody from Whitchurch here, but I think it's hard to object to a recommendation that you should consider an option in relation to the Silk Mill joining in, so I hope we can just say yes to that one. I'm sure if they don't want to join in, they'll make it clear when it's looked at. Right, now we're on to creative spaces. And D3 is on page 65, 182. The council continues to fund Proteus Theatre Company through a grant of 32,411, reducing by 5% per annum until March 2020 for the provision of support service to the sector. In addition, an additional injection of pump prime funding of 35,000 should be given in 2015, which was indeed welcomed by Proteus, but I then got lost, so I'm looking for you to explain to us what the difference between, I appreciate it on paper, the difference between the company. Now, we'll give them a chance first. The difference between the company and the space and the theatre company, not least because historically they were separate until quite recently. So please talk us through what the original proposal was, what the current discussions, if any, are, and where we might be going.
Chair, happy to do that. So historically, we have grant-funded Proteus Touring Company for many years, and they came to us when Fairfields were still in situ at the Fairfields Arts Centre, and came with us with a business model and a proposition to take over that building and essentially create Proteus Creation Space. So the grant funding from Fairfields transferred to this new Proteus Creation Space. So we've had two lots of grant funding, and that's how the grant funding has remained for that period of time. Obviously, this scope area is creative spaces. and so very much aligns itself with Proteus Creation Space. Hence why, under this recommendation, it is specifically related to Proteus Creation Space. Now, Councillor Isaac received an email after these papers went out saying that there's been a decision to recommend 100% withdrawal from the touring company. That has never been the fact. That has never been stated. That is not in these papers. The email said you would destabilise Proteus if you were to do that. We are not looking to give with one hand and take away with the other. We would not want to destabilise something that we say is working really well. So I then went, rather than emailing, rather than picking up the telephone, I went and sat with Mary and we talked it through. And we said, actually, it's a bit superficial. Proteus is Proteus. And whether it's their touring production, whether it's Creation Space, they are Proteus. They're run by the same people from the same building with the same overheads. So what we've suggested is, if this recommendation goes through Cabinet, that 32,000 with the additional 35,000 for 1 year is banked. What we need to do is we can align the two, Proteus Touring, Proteus Creation Space, in one strategic grant application, and that will forever then pull the two together and means that we don't have this oddity of having the two different Proteuses. So it was simply a case of how we went about that. The papers also suggested, and rightly so, that Proteus through their touring could apply for programme funding. That was taken to mean they might be making in excess of 13 different applications for programme funding. That would never be the case, and you'd be looking at a maximum of 4. Hopefully we could have all rolled it into one. So there was also a little bit of misunderstanding about what our programme funding meant, but this is very, very new, and this is a new approach to grant funding. So we've spoken to Mary about it. Councillor Isaac and Councillor Rossleton, along with some of the team, presented to the board so that they were absolutely clear, because it's not just Mary, it's the board that sits behind it. And I think we have a way forwards. What I have simply done is offer our help in saying, if you want to move forward with that option of putting them both in a strategic grant, it still has to go through that same grant process as it always has done and always will do, but we'll help you with that. So that's what's happened literally in the last probably 48 hours, I think Mary would agree.
Talk me through timing. Which years are we talking about?
So the applications that will be made later this year for funding is for funding in 15-16. So it's applications now. They go through this committee in January, February time, moving on to Cabinet March. Sorry, the dates are in the next paper, but it goes through that process and then funding is awarded as it has done on an annual basis. Obviously, what we're looking at is different years of funding, whether it's 3 years or up to 5 years.
Okay, so we're saying we've accepted in principle, because I thought it was an excellently well-made case, that the two should be one, that you should not separately fund them. And what we're saying is that for 2015-16, Proteus need to make an application for the strategic funding under the new process, but that we guarantee that it will be at least the 32,411 and with the pump priming of 35,000 for next year. And it could well be more once they've made their applications. I'm just checking what they're saying first, Mary.
Chair, that's absolutely subject to the Cabinet decision around these recommendations. If the recommendation is accepted by Cabinet, yes, that's absolutely correct.
Mary, I don't want to speech because I've said a lot of people then, but have we got the facts wrong at all?
Yes.
Sorry, excuse me, I know you all want to go home. Just very quickly to explain that Proteus Theatre Company, which isn't, I should just say, not just a touring company, we do 100% of our participatory work in Basingstoke, we don't just do touring shows. We are in receipt, and have always been in receipt, of a grant that has been reducing year on year, which at the moment is currently worth £65,500. That runs the company. That is the company that took on the running of the building. A building costs money to run. I'm just saying this so everyone's clear. The building costs £50,000 to run a year. So 32.5 doesn't cover it anyway. We accept that. We're not arguing that at all. We're saying that's brilliant that you support the running of the building. That's great. But that's if Proteus doesn't receive the £65,500 in March, the company folds. So that's
Yeah,
that's really simple.
fine, yep.
So that's why we were very clear to put in our email, which we sent out to other councillors, some of whom were in the room, just to make people aware of that was what was happening, because I think there was an issue with messaging, and we've talked about that, and Lisa and I talked about it.
I should get in real trouble with the people behind you.
That's fine. It's really important.
No, okay. I just want to get the facts straight. So, yeah, if you turn the light off, but thanks. Sorry. So, 65,000 is the figure we recognise. That is the current.
That is the current grant funding they receive, yes.
And I think probably we all recognise that if the answer turned out to be less than that, it would be a serious problem. But there is.
Yeah, and Chair, in talking to Mary, the proposition that they're looking to put together against that 65,000, that there is a reduction year on year on that, and that is something that Proteus are putting together to put on the table.
Councillor Ives.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry that there was a misunderstanding, and as soon as it became apparent, I acted, and that's why Councillor Osterton and I went to your board meeting yesterday. And I think it was a technical issue, but it's one of those things that happens, and we jumped on it, and we've dealt with it. And I think that the intention of my recommendations is quite clear as far as Proteus is concerned. I visited Proteus. I understand what you're doing. I recognise how much good work you do with very limited resources. I'm somebody who represents a rural ward. I'm really impressed that the touring company goes around the rural areas and brings theatre education to people who generally don't have access to the sort of thing you provide. And that's why, and I think is indicative of where I was coming from here, that we're talking about providing a pump priming of 35,000 in this coming year. So I'm glad that we've been able to resolve it, and I'm also glad that and I'm impressed by the fact that you as an organisation are commercial, because you generate income from the creation space. You let that space out, so that's good, and that's the sort of approach that we're trying to encourage.
The time, and I'm seeing hands. I'm going to try a summary, and then you can come back. I mean, I think what we probably don't want to do as a committee is endorse the 32,411. What we want to say, I think, is that we support the revised approach that Proteus will be funded as and I hope, obviously, again, writing this down, as a whole, that we note that Proteus will be applying for a strategic grant under the new process, assuming the new process is adopted. We fully support the valuable work they do, and that we sincerely, we expect the outcome of that application to be funding sufficient to enable Proteus to continue, and we also welcome the addition of an initial injection of pump priming for 35,000. Now, I'm getting some nods from Mary, so I hope that was all right. And is that okay, committee? Because that's all we can do tonight. Is that okay? Fine, excellent, thank you. Got that? Good. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bierman.
Chair, I'm not being unduly political here, I hope, but the fact that this has occurred has sort of similarities with the Miliband omission in his speech, and that we can be at this stage, after all the money and time that's been spent, to have missed such an important detail worries me, and that's been expressed by several of the speakers. I just want a reassurance that when this goes to Cabinet, which is going to be the next move, I understand, unless, of course, there's this question of it going to scrutiny beforehand, that we think will be clear in the Cabinet papers that what has now been discussed will be the way it will move forward.
Yes.
Very quickly.
Sorry, I don't want to trip ourselves up. Cabinet papers have already gone to print, Councillor Bierman, so there will be a supplemental update as a result of this evening, and we can include it in that, but Cabinet papers have already gone to print.
And in answer to your question, it was too political.
Was it? Yes. I thought you might like it in part, but when will that come out? Because I mean, there's the original papers in circulation, so there'll be a lot of people who are now worried, and it would be good to be putting their minds at rest.
Okay, so the supplemental will be worked up by committee services post the meeting because they're noting all the comments from the committee, and we pull all that together and submit that. So as soon as it can be done, Councillor Bierman.
Okay, recommendation D5 on page 66 of 182, the council creates a fund of 10,000 per annum to be managed by an external organisation that enables rural communities to buy in or deliver arts and cultural activities. Very broad brush, not a lot of money, seems worth giving it a go, unless anyone objects. Okay, fine. Now, that I think is, tell me I haven't missed any, have I, from paper D, except that out of deference to my fellow ward member, Councillor Mrs Taylor did put forward a proposal for a second special fund, and I will read what she said because she's left me with it, I would then, I will not try and steer you on this because she's a fellow ward member. I would welcome your feedback. She said that some money is put aside to allocate to specialist talent recognised in the borough, and which also has a desire and programme to serve the community. Funding can then be allocated to a relevant organisation in order to meet our own desired outcomes, and performance would be regularly assessed to ensure those desired outcomes are achieved. So, comments please. Councillor Mrs Tucker.
Mr. Chairman, when she said it in her speech, I actually wrote it down because I thought it was such a splendid idea. And as you are being a little bit backward in coming forward to propose it, I would like to propose it.
Councillor Bierman.
I'd like to second that formally.
I'm reminded that we don't formally do proposers and seconders, but thank you. The thought is there, and it's. We would like that reported in our as a further recommendation. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'll give you the wording so you've got it. I think that concludes paper D and gets us on to grants. Is that right?
Apart from one pedantic thing, if I may, Chair, yes, it is, but it keeps occurring. But since it's a sort of a headline purpose or aim, can we change localities, as it's got it here as a plural, to singular apostrophe S, because that really grates with me.
Yeah. He is a pedant, but he is right. Right. Okay. Paper E. Thank you, officers and. Portfolio holder staying now. Some officers, some swapping, some staying, some. Right. Now we've already had the presentation on this, but for those of you who haven't read, just as a quick reminder, this is my summary of the key points, and officers are then allowed to tell me I've missed the key points. So the key point is to have a much more rigorous grant process that responds to the issues raised by audit, that the process is clearer, that that we know what we are supposed to get as a council and as a community from the money, and we do actually do some sort of monitoring to check that we get that, and that we divide grants into two kinds. Programme grants, which are for specific activities, which an organisation can bid for, and they can bid for more than one of them, but which will not exceed £20,000 and will normally be for up to 3 years. And that the point about that is that we won't require the organisation to tell us all their finances, their entire business plan. We will just monitor the actual programme which we're funding and the outcome of that programme. And then there will be strategic grants where we're supporting the whole organisation, where we'll need to know about their whole business case, and we will be monitoring the performance of the whole organisation. And this is to apply across the voluntary and community sectors. Now, bringing the time, have I missed anything important out of the summary? Fine. Rebecca, did you want to say anything on behalf, because I think you were down to speak anyway, on behalf of the voluntary, representative of the voluntary sector? Thank you. So that's Rebecca Kenley, Chief Executive Officer of Basingstoke Voluntary Action.
Thank you very much for inviting me to attend today. I was asked to come and give a kind of voluntary sector perspective on the grants paper, and I think the starting point is it's very much welcomed. So as you can well imagine from the debates that have happened over the course of this evening, the voluntary and community sector has been extremely concerned and has watched the COG process very closely, because obviously a number of grants are tied up with the anticipated grants process going forward. And I think when commissioning was first mentioned 2 years ago, there was a concern within the sector that grants would not be available to voluntary community groups and that everything would go down a process of commissioning with potential tendering. So for us as a voluntary sector, we feel very, very heartened to see a very clear process that gives very clear mechanisms for voluntary organisations to continue a positive relationship with the Borough Council around grants. And I think that having the two programmes is essential to maintaining that clarity of relationship. We also very much welcome the commitment from the Borough Council to look at 3 and 5 year funding. Obviously, as a voluntary and community sector, when you're trying to establish business plans, looking at enterprising activity and delivering much needed services to very vulnerable people, that length of funding obviously helps us plan and ensure that clients are supported through a very cohesive and joined up process. I think that one of the things that obviously needs to be looked at through the paper is some of the scoring mechanisms. So I think that a bit of consultation with some organisations may be warranted, because when you look at some of the appendix and you look at the outstanding answers, for example, you have 150 words to put an outstanding answer with about 10 bullet points. I can promise you, being a veteran of application writing continuously, there is absolutely no chance any voluntary community organisation will get an outstanding answer and achieve full scores in 150 words. So I would implore that there is a recommendation to review either the word limit or the outstanding answers on that one. I think it's important for me to say, having listened to the summary of debate this evening, that there are always unintended outcomes, and I think for the voluntary community sector, some of what has happened with the first COG will shake the voluntary sector up. It will give concern to the voluntary sector, and I think to be able to come out as a borough council and say, you may have concerns, but look, we're giving a very clear process by which you can apply for your grants, a very clear process by which we will audit your grant applications and then monitor you in future, I think will help alleviate some of the fears that may come out of the next 2 weeks, having watched some of the voluntary organisations go through this initial COG and some of the cuts in funding that's been received by some of those organisations. So yeah, on a whole, we really support it. We recognise that it's bringing a clarity of process in, but I think at the same time it needs to be clear about when a grant turns into a commission and turns into a COG, and I think that that's something that the voluntary sector would want me to say on their behalf, because certainly although the paper leads to some kind of points there, I think that they want further clarity. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to, sorry, thank you very much. Hang on a minute. Can I just clarify what you would like us to do about your point about the application form and the number of words? Are you in a dialogue? Should we just say we would like the dialogue to continue with the voluntary sector and please listen to Rebecca? Or do you want us to actually say the word number needs to go up because you're not in a dialogue?
I mean, Mark has got extensive history of, developing processes and grant processes for public sector bodies, and I'm sure that you can understand that looking in the appendix and seeing all those bullet points against outstanding, it's just not going to be realistic in 150 words. So if you can put something in there about reviewing the word limit or reviewing what constitutes an outstanding answer, I think that would be reasonable.
Okay, and we can do that internally. We don't need to come back to you.
You can do it internally, or if you want to seek my guidance on that, I'm more than happy to help.
Fine. So committee, can we do that? Because we need to. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we recommend that the word limit's increased, and you take up the opportunity of running the revised form past Rebecca. That would be good. The other thing I wanted to say, you might as well stay there a minute while I say, because I meant to say it in my summary, that this application process is absolutely clearly open to organisations that have not been through a COG. You do not have to have been through a COG. This is open to any community and voluntary organisation, whether they've been through a COG and rejected, through a COG and approved, not covered by a COG at all. I'm absolutely right about that, aren't I? So this is this is a update of our traditional grant process, if you like. It's not part of the COG process, although obviously some of the organisations that will apply for grants will also have featured in the work of a COG. So I think that's what you wanted to hear, and perhaps we could just again minute that the committee will welcome the fact that this was open to. The other thing I meant to say, and well, you might have say in my summary, was that the other thing I particularly welcome was on page 158, where Principle 3 says that we want applications which do not subjectively favour current recipient over new applicants. I don't think it meant subjectively, but leaving the wording aside, I think there has been a feeling around that there's been a lot of inertia in the process, and there's been a lot of pressure to always continue funding the same organisations, and new ones, like particularly Car of the Arts, who I know about, have found it impossible to break into the system. So I explicitly welcome, and I hope the committee will welcome, that the new process will make it easier for new organisations that we've not previously funded to get programme funding, particularly the programme funding. So I hope we can endorse that. Anything else that anyone want to ask Rebecca a question, which is there? Otherwise we'll let her go. Oh, Annie, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say, as a voluntary sector, we entirely endorse the proposition to support new organisations, and we think that that's exceptional. But what we wouldn't support is the support of new organisation at the complete decimation of ones that already exist. So you're in for a tough challenge because you'll have quite a few new organisations applying. So good luck with that one.
Anything that other members of the committee want to say? Thank you. Anyone else want to say anything else? We might even finish before. Thank you very much, Rebecca. So I think that's, you captured our thoughts on that. I was just right. Last item is the work programme. Members will know that I sent them an email saying I intend to propose some fairly substantial reordering of the work programme, but only one new item and no items removed. I won't run through the reasons unless anybody wants me to, because they're all in the email, but for the record, this is what I'm proposing and inviting the committee to approve. That in November, we look at the review of the youth strategy and smoking near children's play areas. Very topical indeed. That in January, we look at neighbourhood management, options for increasing the council's recycling rate, spending the Environmental Investment Fund, and the review of options proposed by COG3 public transport, unless, as actually seems quite likely, its work has slipped in order to take into account what Hampshire County Council decide to do with public transport. So I think it's very unlikely that will be on January, but we'll keep it provisionally in January, because if the recommendations are out by then, we will want to discuss them. But I think that will slip. And then in March, we will do sports, recreation and fitness, and the review of COG3 if it's been deferred. And then officers have suggested we ought to invite a report on the work in our area on troubled families. Apparently a report has been made annually in the past, and they think we're the relevant committee who should be interested in this year. So a committee happy with all those proposed changes to our work programme. Excellent. Thank you very much. You've done excellently well. It's not even the meeting is now closed at 12 minutes past 10. And thank you very much to the members of the public who stuck it out to the end and for your contributions. And sorry I couldn't let some of you back in, but